मंच एक खुला मंच है, आए जब भी चाहे। किशोर मंच एक खुला मंच है, आए जब भी चाहे। हर किशोर को मिलेगा अवसर, खुलती जाए राहें। आए जब भी चाहे, आए जब भी चाहे, आए जब भी चाहे, आए जब भी चाहे। हो कला सामाजिक ज्ञान, भाषा गणित या हो विज्ञान, कठिन नहीं है विषय कोई भी, करो जरा सा ध्यान। हो कला सामाजिक ज्ञान, भाषा गणित या हो विज्ञान, कठिन नहीं है विषय कोई भी, करो जरा सा ध्यान।
ये है
किशोर मंच।
Welcome to the video lecture series in History Class 12th. Today we will discuss about 4th chapter which deals with thinkers, beliefs and buildings during 600 BCE to 600 CE. Before this, in 3rd chapter, which is kinship, caste and class, we dealt with the political, economic, social and also about the status of women during 600 BCE to 600 CE. In this chapter, we will deal with 4 subtopics. Those are important historical monuments, Sanchi and Amravati Stoop, new questions, sacrifices and debates, Jainism and Buddhism, and understanding new religious traditions through sculptures and paintings. So, today we will discuss about important historical monuments, Sanchi and Amravati Stoop. This topic, that is important historical monuments, Sanchi and Amravati Stoop, it gives insight into number 1, what, why and how were stupas built. Secondly, why did Sanchi Stoop survive while Amravati did not? About role of Begums of Bhopal in preserving the stupa at Sanchi and understanding Sanchi sculpture through Buddhist literature, and also about importance of Sanchi Stoop. But before dealing with Amravati and Sanchi Stoop, let us see what monuments are. Monuments are one of the important sources that historians use to reconstruct history. The Stoop is one such, which is very important Buddhist historical source, which reflects Buddhist ideas and practices. Now, question arises, what is a stupa? Stupas are holy Buddhist semicircular mounds where Buddha's bodily remains or objects used by him are buried. According to a Buddhist text is Ashok Avdan. King Ashok Maurya, who is the great patron of Buddhism, he distributed Buddhist relics to important towns to build stupas over them. The important sites where stupas are located, as we can see in the map, the important places are Bharhut, Sanchi, Sarnath and Amravati, where stupas are located. Now the question arises, why were these stupas built? What was the necessity of building these stupas? According to Mahaparinibban Sut is a part of Sut Pitak, and Sut Pitak is one of the 3 holy Buddhist scriptures. So, according to Mahaparinibban Sut, when Buddha was about to attain Mahaparinibban, Mahaparinibban means when he was on the deathbed, his disciple, main disciple Ananda asked him about what to do with the remains of the Buddha. Then Buddha told him to erect stupa at the 4 crossroads, and whosoever shall there place garland or perfume or make a salutation or become peaceful there, the place will bring to them joy and peace for a long time. So now the question arises, how were these stupas built then? To build them, donations were made by kings, as the Satvahana kings. Donations were made by businessmen, guilds, and by men and women, and even by Buddhist monks and nuns to build stupas. The names of the donors are mentioned on the inscriptions found on the railings and pillars of stupas. So, we discussed about monument, stupa, purpose of its building and how it was built. Now, the question arises, what is the structure of the stupa? As we can see in the picture, it's a simple semicircular mound which is called and. Above this and, it is a balcony, as you can see in this picture, which is very clear. Balcony like structure, it is called Harmika, and Harmika means the abode of gods. Abode of gods means where the gods they live. Above Harmika is a mast called the Yashti, and above Yashti is a Chhatri, umbrella, and around the mound is a railing separating the sacred place from the world. The worshippers, they entered through the eastern gateways and walked around the mound, imitating the sun's course through the sky. Why did Sanchi Stoop survive while Amravati did not? Though Amravati Stoop was discovered before Sanchi Stupa, Amravati Stoop, it was discovered in 1796 when a local Raja who wanted to build a temple, he saw the ruins of Amravati Stoop and he decided to use these stones. In 1854, Walter Elliot, English Commissioner of Guntur district, he visited Amravati and he took away with him several sculpture panels to Madras. By the 1850s, some of these slabs from Amravati had begun to be taken to different places. These sculptures, they adorned the gardens of British administrators. At present, the stupa at Amravati is just an insignificant little mound. Whereas, in case of Sanchi Stoop, which was discovered after Amravati in 1818 and situated 20 miles northeast of Bhopal at a village named Sanchi Kankheda. Out of Sanchi's 4 gateways, 3 were still standing. 4th had fallen down but was lying on the spot, and the mound was in good condition. Major Alexander Cunningham, he examined these ruins carefully and he deciphered the inscriptions. 19th century Europeans were interested in taking away slabs of Sanchi Stoop also to their country, just as in the case of Amravati Stoop. But Sanchi Stoop was saved. The role of Begums of Bhopal in preserving the stoop at Sanchi was significant and marvelous. The rulers of Bhopal, Shahjahan Begum and her successors, Sultan Jahan Begum, they took various steps to preserve this important historical monument at Sanchi. What were those steps taken by Shahjahan Begum and Sultan Jahan Begum? They were as follows. Firstly, what they did, when the French wanted to take away the eastern gateway to be displayed in the museum in France, and some Englishmen, they also wanted to do the same. At that time, Shahjahan Begum satisfied them by giving them carefully prepared plaster cast copies, and the original remained at the site. Secondly, Shahjahan Begum and her successor Sultan Jahan Begum, they made donations for the preservation of this historical stoop at Sanchi. Thirdly, these Begums of Bhopal, they also funded the publication of the volumes written on Sanchi by John Marshall. Fourthly, without money nothing can be done. So these Begums, they spent money on building a museum and guest house near the site where John Marshall lived and wrote volumes on Sanchi. Last but not the least, the Sanchi Stoop escaped from the eyes of railway contractors and builders. So, Sanchi Stoop survived while Amravati did not. Now, how to understand this Sanchi sculpture through Buddhist literature? There are various stories from Buddhist literature which are depicted in the sculpture at Sanchi. And to understand it, art historians had to take the help from Buddhist literature. According to Buddhist literature, Buddha attained Nibbana. Nibbana means enlightenment under a tree, and many early sculptures, they did not show Buddha in human form. Rather, they showed his presence through symbols. For example, the empty seat indicates Buddha in meditation. The stoop, it indicates the Mahaparinibban. Wheel signifies first sermon of the Buddha delivered at Sarnath. And such sculptures cannot be understood literally. For example, the tree symbolizes an incident in Buddha's life. So, to understand the meaning of all these symbols, it is very important to understand the traditions of those who produced these works of art. Like in folk traditions, some sculptures at Sanchi were not directly related to Buddhist ideas. For example, there is a sculpture of beautiful woman swinging from the edge of the gateway holding on to a tree. This image is representation of Shalbhanjika described in Sanskrit text as a woman whose touch caused trees to flower and bear fruit. Now, this is no way related to idea of renunciation of Buddhism. According to scholars, the Shalbhanjika motif was regarded as an auspicious symbol and used it for decoration of the stupa. This suggests that many people who turned to Buddhism, they incorporated their pre-Buddhist and non-Buddhist beliefs, practices and ideas into Buddhism. And definitely, the symbols used in sculptures at Sanchi were derived from these traditions. The images of animals like elephant, which symbolizes strength and wisdom. Horse, it is symbolic of energy and effort, they were used. So, often animals were used to symbolize human attributes, and many Jatak stories are depicted at Sanchi. There is a motif of a woman surrounded by lotuses, and lotus symbolizes purity and fortune and hence divine birth, and elephant symbolic of strength and wisdom. They are sprinkling water on her. Some historians identify this figure as Maya, the mother of the Buddha, and others they identify her with goddess Gajalakshmi, that is goddess of good fortune. Maybe devotees who saw these sculptures, they identified the figure with both Maya and Gajalakshmi. In several Sanchi pillars, the motif of serpent is used. James Ferguson, modern art historian, he considered Sanchi to be the center of the tree and serpent worship. He arrived at this conclusion because he studied these images in isolation, and James Ferguson was not familiar with Buddhist literature. So, to understand Sanchi, the study of Buddhist text is a necessity because it helps in understanding Sanchi's culture. Now comes, what is the importance of Sanchi's stupa in history? Firstly, it is an excellent example of ancient Indian sculpture. Secondly, it is an important Buddhist center which helped in understanding initial Buddhism. So, we discussed about what is a stupa, why and how were stupas built, why did Sanchi stupa survive while Amravati did not, role of Begums of Bhopal in preserving the stupa at Sanchi, understanding Sanchi's culture through Buddhist literatures and importance of Sanchi stupa. Next, we will discuss about new questions, sacrifices and debates. Thank you. Welcome to the video lecture series in History Class 12th. Today, we will discuss about 4th chapter which deals with thinkers, beliefs and buildings during 600 BCE to 600 CE. CE is Common Era. In this chapter, we will deal with 4 subtopics. Those are already discussed, Important historical monuments Sanchi and Amravati Stoop. New questions, sacrifices and debates about Jainism and Buddhism, and understanding new religious traditions through sculptures and paintings. Today, we will discuss about new questions, sacrifices and debates. This subtopic gives insight into tradition of sacrifices in ancient India, about speculations on the significance of the sacrificial traditions, difference between ideas of Upanishadic thinkers and those of the fatalists and the materialists, and also about importance of 6th century BCE in relation to sacrifices and debates. Around the mid-first millennium BCE, BCE is before Common Era, many revolutionary changes they were taking place. On one side, thinkers like Gautam Buddha and Mahavira, they tried to understand the mysteries of existence and the relationship between human beings and the cosmic order. On the other side, this was the time when new kingdoms and cities they were emerging, and there were sea changes in the social and economic life in the Gangetic Valley. These thinkers, means Gautam Buddha, Mahavira, along with finding answers to the questions like relationship between human beings and the cosmic order, they also tried to understand these social, political and economic developments. Let us now see what were those traditions of sacrifices in ancient India. Many traditions of thought, religious beliefs and practices were followed since ancient period. Early Vedic tradition was one such tradition. It is also known as Rig Vedic period. Why Rig Vedic period? Because Rig Veda, which was compiled between 1500 to 1000 BC, BC is before Common Era. Now, this Rig Veda is the only source that provides information about this period. And Rig Veda, it consists of mantras or hymns in praise of a variety of deities. The prominent deities were Agni, Indra and Som. When sacrifices were performed, these mantras were chanted and people prayed for cattle, sons, good health and long life, etc., etc. Means all materialistic things. One such example which is taken from Rig Veda is a prayer to Agni. The verses are sung along with sacrificial fire to invoke Agni. Agni, the god of fire, and offerings were made. Agni was expected to take these offerings along with prayers to other deities. It says, "Bring, O strong one," means Agni, "this sacrifice of ours to the gods. O wise Agni, bring for us abundant food and wealth. O Agni, those who praise to you, bring them nourishment, wonderful cow, sons and offsprings, that continues our line. Initially, the sacrifices were performed collectively. Later on, between 1000 BCE to 500 BCE onwards, some sacrifices were performed by the heads of the households for the well-being of their families. Some complex sacrifices such as Rajasuya Yagya, it is king's inauguration sacrifice performed by the ancient kings who considered themselves powerful enough to be an emperor, and Ashwamedha Yagya. In this case, in the case of Ashwamedha Yagya, the army of the military campaign is led by a wandering horse, let loose from the capital of the king, who performed this sacrifice. In case of Rajasuya Yagya, no horse was involved, and yajna were performed by kings because these yajnas, they needed elaborate arrangements, and kings depended on Brahmana priests to perform these rituals. Now, speculations on the significance of the sacrificial traditions. Around 6th century BCE onwards, the speculations on the significance of the sacrificial traditions started. The Upanishads, they dealt with philosophical questions like search for the meaning of life, possibility of life after death, and rebirth. It debated on issues like, was rebirth due to past actions? Rather than performing sacrifices for materialistic benefits like wealth and sons, etc. For example, the verse from Chandogya Upanishad, it says about the true sacrifice. The wind that blows this is surely a sacrifice, because while moving, the wind purifies all this. Therefore, it is indeed a sacrifice. Here we can see the debate on the significance of the sacrificial rituals for materialistic benefits, it had begun. Chandogya Upanishad again speculates about the nature of the self. This self of mine within the heart, it is smaller than paddy or barley or mustard or millet or the kernel of a seed of millet. This self of mine within the heart is greater than the earth, greater than the intermediate space, greater than heaven, greater than these worlds. And this was very much opposed to the sacrificial traditions for materialistic gains. So, lively debates and discussions. As many as 64 sects or schools of thoughts were in existence during this time, and Buddhist texts give us a glimpse of lively discussions and debates among them. During these debates, teachers like Mahavira and the Buddha, they questioned the authority of the Vedas. According to them, liberation from worldly sorrows can be attained by individual efforts. And this was opposed to the sacrificial tradition and Brahmanical position, wherein an individual's existence was thought to be determined by his or her birth in a specific caste or gender. These debates, they took place in a Kuta Garshala, literally means a hut with a pointed roof, or in grooves where travelling teachers, they halted for some time. If one philosopher succeeded in convincing his rival, then the followers of his rival also became his disciples. So, support for any particular sect could grow and shrink over time. Difference between Upanishadic thoughts and those of fatalists and materialists. The fatalists and materialists were one of those 64 sects. Fatalists or Ajivikas, they believed in destiny. According to Makkali Gosala, the fatalist teacher, though the wise hopes that by doing good deeds and penance, they will gain karma, and the fool should, by the same means, hope to gradually rid himself of his karma. Neither of them can do it. Pleasure and pain, measured out as it were, cannot be altered in the course of transmigration. It can neither be lessened nor increased. Just as a ball of string will, when thrown unwind to its full length, so fool and wise alike will take their course and make an end of sorrow. On the other hand, a philosopher named Ajit Kesh Chamberlain, he taught materialism or Lokayat. He said, there is no such thing as alms or sacrifice or offerings, this world or the next. A human being is made up of the four elements. Elements are earth, water, fire and air. When he dies, the earthy in him returns to earth, the fluid to water, the heat to fire and the windy to air, and his senses pass into space. Fools believe in donations, which is an empty lie. Fools and wise alike are cut off and perish. Nobody survives after death. Upanishads dealt with meaning of life, questions about life after death and rebirth, soul, supreme soul, and aim of human life is dissolution of human soul into supreme soul, that is Param Brahma. So, fatalists believed that everything is predetermined and nothing can be changed. Materialists do not believe in life after death, whereas Upanishadic philosophy stressed on karmic theory and questions about life after death. Importance of 6th century BCE in relation to sacrifices and debates. Firstly, instead of Vedic sacrificial traditions, the Upanishadic philosophy started gaining prominence. People started searching for new ways to attain moksha, that is, freedom from the cycle of birth and death. So, new philosophies emerged. Secondly, around 64 new philosophies emerged. Among these, Buddhism and Jainism gained prominence, resulting into change in Indian society and culture. Thirdly, Jainism and Buddhism stressed on self-control and penances. Their philosophy was very much similar to Upanishadic thoughts. Fourthly, the new philosophies like Jainism and Buddhism, they were simpler than Vedic sacrificial traditions. Unlike Vedic caste system, they treated everybody with equality and criticized birth-based caste system. They spread their message in simple common man's language. So, we discussed about tradition of sacrifices in ancient India, about speculations on the significance of the sacrificial traditions, difference between ideas of Upanishadic thinkers and that of the fatalists and the materialists, and about importance of 6th century BCE in relation to sacrifices and debates. In the same chapter, next we will discuss about Jainism and Buddhism. Thank you. Welcome to the video lecture series in History Class 12th. Today, we will continue with our discussion about 4th chapter, which deals with thinkers, beliefs and buildings during 600 BCE to 600 CE. In this chapter, we are dealing with 4 subtopics. 2 we have already discussed. Those are important historical monuments, Sanchi and Amravati Stoop, and about new questions, sacrifices and debates. Today we will discuss about Jainism and Buddhism, and after that understanding new religious traditions through sculptures and paintings. Jainism and Buddhism gives insight into origin and central teachings of Jainism, compilation of teachings of Mahavira, spread of Jainism, and in Buddhism its origin, teachings of Buddha, preparation and preservation of Buddhist text, Buddhist organization or Sangh, and also about causes of the rapid growth of Buddhism and comparison between Buddhism and Jainism. Around 600 BCE, that is before Common Era, to 600 CE, that is Common Era, approximate 64 sects were prevalent, and Jainism and Buddhism emerged as the most prominent among them. Now about Jainism. The basic philosophy of the Jainas was already in existence in North India before the birth of Vardhaman Mahavira. According to Jain traditions, Vardhaman Mahavira is the 24th Tirthankar. Tirthankar means the guide who shows path to men and women across the river of existence. Then what were the central teachings of Jainism? Firstly, Jainas believed that the whole world is animated. Even stones, rocks and water have life. Secondly, non-violence, especially towards humans, animals, plants and insects is the central theme of Jaina philosophy. Jainas believed in karmic theory, that is, according to Jain teachings, the cycle of birth and rebirth is shaped through karma, and to attain freedom from the cycle of karma, Jaina philosophy stressed upon severe penance and asceticism. This penance and asceticism is possible only by renouncing the world, and for renunciation, living in monasteries is a necessity. In monasteries, Jaina monks and nuns, they took certain vows like non-violence. They took vow of aparigraha. Aparigraha means abstain from possessing property. They took vow of brahmacharya, that is to observe celibacy. No stealing, no lying. Now let us see about compilation of teachings of Mahavira. The teachings of Mahavira were recorded by his disciples in common man's language, often in the form of stories which could appeal to ordinary people like you and me. For example, in Uttradhyan Sutta, it's a Prakrit text story of a queen named Kamlavati. Kamlavati, who is trying to persuade her husband to renounce the world, and how one enjoys freedom once he or she gets free from the worldly things. The spread of Jainism. Jaina literature was produced in a variety of languages like Prakrit, Sanskrit and Tamil, which shows that it is spread to many parts of India. Secondly, Jaina manuscripts were carefully preserved in libraries, the libraries which were attached to the temples. Many stone sculptures of Jaina Tirthankaras were produced by devotees which have been recovered from various sites throughout India. Now let's talk about Buddhism now, since they both were contemporary. Now Buddhism originated in India and very soon it is spread to various parts of the world. But Jainism did not spread to various parts of the world. As we can see in the map, Buddhism is spread to China, Sri Lanka, Korea, Japan, Burma, which is now called Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia, many other countries. About origin of Buddhism, according to hagiographies, hagiography means it is a biography of a saint or religious leader which often praises the saint's achievements and may not always be literally accurate. Now, Gautam Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, his childhood name was Siddhartha. He was the son of the chief of the Shakya clan, and he was brought up in a very protected environment, in palace, between luxuries, and he was kept away from the harsh realities of life. One day, he persuaded his charioteer to take him into the city for a ride. There he saw four things. He saw an old man, a sick man, a dead body, and a saint, an ascetic. An old man, a sick man, and dead body made him realize that the decay and destruction of the human body is unavoidable. And the ascetic seemed to him had come to terms with old age, disease, death, and he has found peace in himself. Now, Siddhartha decided to follow the path of that saint who is free from all these worries and everything. So, Siddhartha also left home. He meditated for several days and finally he attained enlightenment and thus called the Buddha. Buddha means enlightened. Now, the teachings of the Buddha. Buddha taught about four noble truths. Those were, the world is constantly changing, so it is transient, that means anitya, and there is nothing permanent in this world, so world is soulless, that is anant. In this ever changing soulless world, sorrow, dukh is intrinsic to human existence, means till humans are in existence, sorrow will be there. Now, how to get rid of sorrow? So, human beings can get rid of sorrow by following the path of penances and asceticism known as Eightfold Path or Ashtangic Marg. Buddha did not say anything about the existence of God. According to Buddha, the social world is not of divine origin. Rather, this social world, the world we are living in, it's created by humans. So, Buddha advised householders and kings to be kind, caring, and ethical. Example is an advice by Buddha to a wealthy householder named Sigal. This story is taken from Sutta Pitaka. Sutta Pitaka is one of the 3 Pitaks, where Buddha advised him about how to behave with servants, sannyasis, parents, teachers and his wife. And an individual can attain self-realization and freedom from cycle of birth and death through individual efforts, not through sacrifices. His last words to his followers were, "Be lambs unto yourself, as all of you must work out your own liberation." Rather than extreme path, Buddha advocated the path of moderation. Extreme path was followed by Jainas, not by Buddhists. Buddha advocated the path of moderation, that is, between severe penance and self-indulgence, follow the middle path. Preparation and preservation of Buddhist text. Buddha always taught orally. None of his speeches were written down during his lifetime. After Buddha's death, around 5th or 4th century BC, his teachings were compiled by his disciples, that too at a council of elders or senior monks of Vaishali. Vaishali is in present-day Bihar. These compilations were known as 3 Pitaks. Sutta Pitaka I already told you, na, part of 3 Pitaks. So 3 Pitaks literally means 3 baskets to hold different types of texts. These 3 Pitaks were written and classified according to length and subject matter. These are Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka and Abhidhamma Pitaka. In Sutta Pitaka, Buddha's teachings were included. Vinaya Pitaka, it included rules and regulations for those who joined monastic order or sangha. And Abhidhamma Pitaka, it dealt with philosophical matters. Later on, commentaries were written on these texts by Buddhist scholars. Texts like Deepavansh literally means the chronicle of the island, and Mahavansh, the great chronicle. They were written in Sri Lanka and contained regional histories of Buddhism in Sri Lanka. Buddhist texts were preserved in manuscripts for several centuries in monasteries in different parts of Asia, and modern translations have been prepared from Pali, Sanskrit, Chinese and Tibetan texts. Now about Buddhist organization or Sangha. The number of followers of Buddhism increased, and thus Sangha, that is, an organization of monks who too became teachers of Dhamma or the path of righteous living was formed. These monks, they led simple life with only essential requisites for survival. They lived on alms, thus called bhikkhus. Initially, only men were allowed in the Sangha. Later on the mediation of Ananda, who was Ananda? He was one of the dearest disciple of Buddha. So when he requested Buddha, then women were also allowed in the Sangha, and they were called bhikkhunis. The first woman to be ordained as bhikkhuni was Mahaprajapati Gautami. Mahaprajapati Gautami, she was the foster mother of Buddha, and many bhikkhunis later became theris. Theris means women who attained liberation, means the one who is free from the cycle of birth and death. All in Sangha, whether king, wealthy men, workers, slaves, craftspeople, anyone. Once they are within the Sangh, they were treated equally as bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. The internal functioning of the Sangh was democratic, where decision was arrived at through discussions. If discussions failed, decisions were taken by a vote on the subject. Now, let's discuss about causes of the rapid growth of Buddhism during and after Buddha. People were dissatisfied with existing religious practices and they were confused by the rapid social changes around them. Rather than claims of superiority based on birth, the importance was given to conduct and values in Buddhism. The emphasis was on met. Met means fellow feeling, and karuna, compassion, especially towards younger and weaker section, which attracted people towards Buddhism. The number of followers increased rapidly when women were allowed to be part of Sangh along with men, because women also got a chance to be part of Sangh. Now, let's compare between Buddhism and Jainism. Both Mahavir and Buddha, they belong to the ruling class, one similarity. They both never differentiated on the basis of caste and they treated men from different social groups equally, another similarity. Both taught in simple common man's language, third similarity. Both stressed on non-violence and they both were against sacrificial traditions, fourth similarity. Fifth similarity, both of them neither accepted nor denied God's existence. And they both aimed nirvana or moksha, that is cessation from the cycle of birth and death. But Buddha believed in middle path, neither severe penance nor overindulgence, whereas Jainism advocated extreme penance and asceticism. Buddha became popular not only in India but also in other parts of the world, whereas Jainism got confined only till India. So, in this subtopic, Jainism and Buddhism, we discussed about origin and central teachings of Jainism, compilation of teachings of Mahavira, spread of Jainism, then origin of Buddhism, teachings of Buddha, preparation and preservation of Buddhist text, Buddhist organization or Sangha, causes of the rapid growth of Buddhism and comparison between Buddhism and Jainism. Thank you.
Welcome viewers, I'm Mamta. Today we are taking up chapter 3 of class 12 psychology. This carries 7 marks weightage according to CBSE. The name of the chapter is Human Strengths and Life Challenges. Now, if I ask you a question when you're going for an exam or if you're going for an interview, what are the sensations, the feelings, the symptoms that you're experiencing before you appear for that particular situation? Now, for the same situation, 4 different people are going to give different responses. That is what we call as stress, the reaction of an individual to a particular situation, which basically determines the coping style, the resources the person has, and which can also disturb the equilibrium or the balance in the body. Now, do you think all kind of stress is bad? Because we keep talking about this concept of stress, you hear it so often, and people every time feel that they are stressed out. But do you think it is good also in any way, or is it all bad? Now researchers have said that, a lot of times when, let's say, when we are studying for an exam, that time if the level of our stress is average according to our capacity, if it is optimal according to our capacity, it is considered good also. This is known as eustress. So the stress which helps you attain your maximum and best performance, which helps you deal with crisis situation, which energizes you and gives you so much energy to deal with that particular situation. This is known as eustress. On the other hand, the stress which limits you, which affects you negatively, which results in a disturbance in the equilibrium, which results in a wear and tear in your body, is known as a distress. Now, these are the two major concepts, along with which we come to the starting point of stress concept. It was taken from a Latin word, strictus, which means to tighten. So whenever somebody experiences stress, they feel a lot of discomfort in the body. That's the internal disturbance, or the tight feeling, or the narrow feeling. Then we have another concept related to it, which is known as stressor. Another one is strain. Now stressor is any outside event to which a person responds. So outside event is a stressor. The person's reaction is known as a strain. Now we have one more very important definition of stress, through which the definition and the concept of stress started. This was Hans Selye's, who is the father of modern stress research, according to whom stress is a non-specific reaction of an individual to a situation. Now non-specific means it's very general. So every emotion, every situation, it's going to be the same reaction. But normally if you look at it, it doesn't happen that way. If I'm angry, my reaction will be different. In case of any other emotion, when I'm stressed out, my reaction will be different. So criticizing this concept, we moved on to the concept of Lazarus, which is known as the appraisal concept. Now appraisal means the way I look at a situation, the way I perceive a situation. So same situation, different people will look at it in a different manner. It's like the color of my lens, or it's like the way I'm looking. What is my frame of reference in my mirror through which I'm looking? It could be my past experience which determines this. It could be some other factor which determines it. That's what we're looking at right now. Now the concept of appraisal is divided into two parts, primary appraisal and secondary appraisal. Primary appraisal refers to the perception of a new or changing environment, that is whatever outside environment is changing, either as positive, negative or neutral in consequence. Now this is again our perception, our interpretation of the outside situation, whether we look at it in terms of positive, having a positive consequence, or we look at it in terms of negative. So this is of importance here. Negative would mean any kind of harm, threat or challenge. Harm is the damage which is already done. Threat is a future damage that we are perceiving it to be, any situation having a future damage that we think it to be. And challenge is kind of an opportunity that we are looking at it as what we can prove in that particular situation, what kind of success we can get out of that particular situation. Now once this appraisal is done, the primary appraisal, particularly the negative one, we move on to the second part of it, which is known as a secondary appraisal. Now once we know that the situation is going to be harmful or threatening or is a challenge, then we try to look at what kind of resources or abilities we are having here. So those situations, those abilities, those particular skills help us deal with that appraisal. So that is the concept of secondary appraisal here. To understand this concept of appraisal, once we have done the secondary appraisal, we have three major aspects under it to help us understand it holistically. Now first is the kind of stressors that a person is experiencing. So outside events which result in our body giving a response. It could be the intensity, that is a type of a stressor, which could be the intensity of it, how much high or low that event is, the duration of it, that is for how long that particular event has been, the controllability of it, that is that event under my control? Suppose there's noise coming from the background when I'm studying. Is it under my control? What all can I do to handle that particular situation is the controllability. Last type of stressor is the predictability, which means that do I know that this particular situation is bound to happen, then I am kind of prepared for it. If I do not know, it's all of a sudden somebody dies in a family, all of a sudden when you're not prepared for it, then your reaction is very much stressful. That particular situation is highly stressful. So if the duration is for long, intensity is very high, predictability is low and controllability is low, stress is going to be very high. The second kind of appraisal the second kind of factor which results in appraisal is talking about the person's characteristics. Now here we're talking about the physical characteristics of the person, the psychological, as well as the social and environmental factors, so which we call as the cultural factors. So when we talk about the physical factors per se, we talk about the health of a person, the physical health. So for instance, a particular child, starts having a stomach ache just before the exam. So that's a physical symptom that the body is showing, because the stomach is the weakest area for that particular person. So that way, as a person, constitutionally the person's stomach is very weak. A particular person, starts having viral very frequently, so misses school for that reason, or misses workplace for that reason. High absenteeism is there. That's another factor which is counted on here and in the physical health area. Second factor we have is the psychological characteristics. Here we talk about the mental health of a person, the confidence of a person, the way a person perceives a situation. Suppose a person feels that a particular maths problem is given for solving out, and this person says that I can solve that particular problem. So for this person, the self-concept is high, because every situation the person is getting across, the person has the feeling, has the faith and the ability that I can handle this particular situation. Somebody criticizes you. Your reaction could be to get defensive, that okay, I did not do it, please don't misunderstand me. The other could be that maybe there is some element of truth in it, let me reconsider, let me think about it and not feel negative about it. So this is your perception again based on your qualities, the way your mental health is. Do you tend to get into worry and anxiety very easily, or do you tend to analyze it in a positive manner? That's the psychological characteristics. Then we have the third concept, which is the culture. Now culture again determines your perception, because in one particular culture it will depend on what do people say. So a particular culture, for that particular culture the outside forces matter a lot. For the other culture it would be, what is my success, what do I want to do. So that's again the cultural concept in appraising a particular situation. So third concept that we have is the concept of resources, which helps us appraise a particular situation. Resources in terms of the physical resources that we have, that is money that we have, or the health factors that we have, the medical care. It could be the personal factors, the skills that a person has, the coping abilities that a person has. Third factor also considers the first two along with it, and this is also one kind of resource which is society related resource. Social support, what kind of family network, what kind of relations a person has, which helps a person at the time of stressful situation. So these three factors, including the stressors that a person experiences, the qualities that a person has, and the resources the person has to handle a particular situation, determines appraisal. Now moving on to the concept of signs and symptoms as to how to identify if a person is having stress. Because most of the time stress goes undiagnosed. Nobody really realizes they are under stress till the time they go for a particular vacation or they take a break. Now, to identify stress, we have a lot of categories of symptoms. It deals with the physiological symptoms, that is what happens in the body, because most of the time when the hormones are released in a stressful situation, the first damage is to the body. So body systems get affected, but that's a gradual process, so people normally don't realize it. Then we have the cognitive, which are the major factors through which stress can be identified. That's the very quickest and easy to identify. A person is not able to concentrate. A person forgets. A person is not able to make proper decisions. A person is not able to use rational thinking. So all these aspects result in the cognitive aspect of, that is how we identify the stress. We also have the behavioral aspect. Sometimes people are not able to, have any appetite. So they are not able to eat properly. They are not able to sleep properly. So eating and sleeping is affected. People tend to go in for drugs or any addiction, any substances. Watching TV is also an addiction. Or they get into book reading as an escape. They tend to cry a lot, get very irritable, mood swings are there. All these are symptoms, worry, anxiety, fear, all these are symptoms which help us identify that a person is stressed out and needs a break. Now moving on to the next topic, what are the different kinds of stress that are there? What are the different kinds of stressors which are there? First kind of stressors are the physical and environmental stressors. Physical, dealing with body stress. Suppose a person overexerts. So more than your capacity you are working physically. It could be playing a lot for, let's say, a number of hours. It could be physical labor that a person does, a daily wager does. That's a physical stress which exerts the body. Second is environmental stress. Now this stress could either be a general environment, a lot of noise which irritates a person, getting into a particular place and it's very crowded, so the person feels stressed out, very, very uncomfortable. It could also be normal heat pollution, which could result in road rage. A high temperature could result in a road rage. And it could be a major environmental stressor like a traumatic situation. Any earthquake, any robbery, a major traumatic situation of the environment can be environmental stressor. Second type of stressor that we have is a psychological factor, psychological stressor. Under this, which is an internal stressor that we create within ourselves, it's a personal stressor which is only to the person experiencing it. For somebody else, it may not apply. So under this, we have three categories. First is frustration. Frustration is referring to any particular goal which is blocked. So I want to top the exam, but by 1% I left out on the second position, or I'm not able to get into a particular college which I desired. So whatever goal I had, there's a block in that particular goal, and this is what we call as frustration. Second is a conflict. Now there can be incompatible needs or motives. There can be two goals, two choices that I am given with. Should I take up humanities or should I take up commerce with maths? These are the two choices. Should I study right now or should I go out for a movie with my friends? So these are the choices that a person gets. So based on the choices that you make results in a conflict resolution or a conflict which continues. Third factor is known as the pressure factor. Now pressure could be internal, my own expectations from myself. When I am working hard, I expect to achieve a certain level of performance. That's an internal pressure where I have a certain belief and I want to accomplish that. A second part of it is social pressure. Social pressure refers to the kind of expectation the society has from a particular person. So what society values and we want to do that, that's a social pressure. Now third kind of stressor that we have is a social stressor. Here we're talking about the major changes in life which result in an upheaval in the person's life. For instance, death of a family member, chronic illness, any kind of strained relationships which result in a stress in the social situation. Last topic for today that we have is the sources of stress. Now there are three major sources of stress that we have to cover. First source of stress is the life events. Now these are the changes, small or big, which results in a person's routine change. So the normal routine of a person gets disturbed. It could be shifting a house, it could be a break in a friendship or a misunderstanding in a relationship. All that is a life event. It could be neighbors which are not very healthy. All that can result in life event stressor. Second source of stress is the daily hassles. Now these are particularly insignificant, but when they add on in everyday life, they ultimately result in a lot of stress. So daily hassles could mean that for a housewife, small changes in the family setup or small emergency situation that she has to handle, that could be daily hassles. For a child who's going to school, getting up in the morning, if he gets late, misses his bus, gets late for the exam, all of that is a daily hassle. Getting stuck up in a traffic jam is a daily hassle. So when they accumulate, when they add on, it results in a lot of stress. Now the third factor, the third source of stress is the traumatic events. The major traumas that a person goes through, it could be a mass trauma or the trauma in the life of a person, which turns around a person's life and is a major cause of stress for a long period. It could be a fire, an accident, a robbery in the family. It could be any natural disaster. Now that results in a lot of changes in the perception of a person. The person can tend to get very negative. The person can lose hope. The person gets very irritable and frustrated and doesn't know what to do. So all such aspects can also be a major source of stress. Now under this, Holmes and Rahe have done a research which deals with 51 life stressors that they presented to the participants. And they try to understand how much stress a particular event causes to that person. That was for a self-rating scale. To summarize for today, we understood the concept of human strengths and virtues, positive aspects that we have that help us deal and cope with various situations. From there, we moved on to the concept of adaptation and adjustment to understand how it helps us in dealing with situations. And then we understood the concept of stress and the various signs and symptoms, the different types of stress, the concept of appraisal. And then we summarize the sources of stress. That's about it for today. Thank you.
Hello students, I am Dr. R.K. Kaul. I teach geography at Pathway School, Noida. Today we will be talking about geography as a discipline. The subtopics which I will be covering here today in this topic would be: why should we study geography, what is geography, what geography as a discipline is concerned about, and most importantly, geography as an integrating discipline. Let me first begin with why should we study geography. Now, as you know students, we all live on the surface of the earth. Our lives are affected by the surroundings in many ways. We depend on the resources to sustain ourselves. Our surroundings affect us, and we in turn also affect the surroundings of ourselves. Now, it is of utmost concern to all of us to know, as students and as study people of geography, we should be curious to know about all the phenomena which vary over space, what we learn about the diverse lands and people from the study of geography, and you will also be interested in understanding the changes which have taken place over time. These all concerns make geography as a very curious and an interesting subject. Geography equips us to appreciate the diversity and investigate into the causes responsible for creating such variations over time and space. You will develop skills to understand the globe, convert it into maps, and have a visual sense of the earth's surface. The understanding and skills obtained in the modern scientific techniques such as GIS and computer cartography equip you to meaningfully contribute to the national endeavor for development. Now, let me just briefly take you to what is geography. In very simple words, if we try to define geography, we can say that geography is the description of the earth. The term geography was first coined by Eratosthenes, a Greek scholar who coined this term, and it has been derived from two Greek words. Geo means earth and graphos meaning description. Now, both the words put together, we can say that geography is the description of the earth. But geography in isolation without human beings, earth in isolation without human beings is meaningless. So, the earth has always been seen as the abode of human beings, and thus geographers defined, the scholars defined geography as the description of the earth as the abode of human beings, because earth is constantly being modified by humans, and humans in turn modify the surface of the earth. They leave their imprints on the surface of the earth. Apart from that, earth is also multidimensional. That is why many disciplines from natural sciences such as geology, petrology, oceanography, botany, zoology, meteorology, and a number of sister disciplines in social sciences such as economics, history, sociology, political science, and anthropology, etc., study different aspects of the earth's surface. So far as geography is concerned, geography is different from other sciences in its subject matter and methodology, but at the same time it is closely related to other disciplines. Geography derives its data from all natural and social sciences and attempts their synthesis. There exists variations over the surface of the earth in its physical as well as cultural environment. a number of phenomena are similar and many are dissimilar. It was therefore logical to perceive geography as the study of areal differentiation. Thus, geography was perceived to study all those phenomena which vary over space. Now, geographers do not study only the variations in the phenomena over the Earth's surface, but they also study associations with the other factors which cause these variations. Thus, geographical phenomena, both the physical and human, are not static but highly dynamic. They change over time as a result of the interactive processes between ever changing Earth and untiring and ever active human processes. So far as primitive societies were concerned, these primitive societies were directly dependent on the environment and did not have much to do with their own efforts, because they were mostly concerned and their activities were mostly determined by the physical environment. Geography thus is concerned with the study of the nature and human interaction as an integrated whole. We also consider this as the problem of environmentalism, what we call as that environment determines the activities of the human beings. That was mostly with the primitive societies. Human is an integral part of nature, and nature has the imprints of humans. Nature has influenced different aspects of human life. Its imprints can be noticed on food, clothing, shopping, shelters, occupation. Now, if we see any landscape on the surface of the earth, apart from the physical features, if one can see the imprints of the human beings on the surface of the earth, be it in the form of settlements, be in the form of shopping malls, hospitals, roads, buildings. These are all forms where humans have tamed nature and made it to their advantage. Present societies therefore have modified their natural environment by inventing and using technology, and thus have expanded the horizon of their operation by appropriating and utilizing resources by nature. Those areas where human activities are not possible, but these have been tamed by humans to their advantage. With the gradual development of technology, human beings are able to loosen the shackles of the physical environment. Even those areas which are dry and desert areas, human habitations are thriving in all forms. This is one of the ways in which humans have been able to tame environment with the help of their technological skills and ingenuity. We now therefore find two things. One is the humanized nature and other is the naturalized human beings, and it is the relationship, the interactive relationship of both humanized nature and naturalized human beings that we study in geography. Geography as a discipline is concerned with three sets of questions. Some questions are related to the identification of patterns of natural and cultural features as found over surface of the earth. These are questions about what. The other set of questions are related to distribution of natural and cultural features over the surface of the earth. These are questions about where. And third set of questions related to the explanation or the causal relationship between the features and the processes and phenomena. These are aspects of geography which are related to the question of why. So, three sets of questions are basically what we study in geography, that is what, where and why. That is what makes the study of geography distinct from other disciplines. Geography as a discipline is related to space and takes note of spatial characteristics and attributes. It studies the patterns of distribution, location, concentration of phenomena over space and interprets them, providing explanations for these patterns. One of the important words which we use often in geography is the word space. The variation of phenomena over space is an essential concern of geography, be it in the form of the humans, for example, the density of population, the distribution of population, or other aspects of the human activities in the form of settlements, roads. These are all aspects which we study in geography. Now, let us have a look at geography and its relationship with other subjects. Geography is an integrating discipline. It is a discipline of synthesis. It attempts spatial synthesis as compared to history, which we say is a temporal synthesis. Its approach is holistic in nature and it recognizes the world is a system of interdependencies. If we have a look at this diagram, this clearly depicts us the interfaces of geography with other subjects, from geology, microbiology, hydrology, pedology, botany to other natural sciences. All forms of knowledge have their interfaces with geography, from economics, demography to political science. So, geography is an integrating discipline, has interface with numerous natural and social sciences. Every discipline is concerned with the scientific knowledge and is linked with geography. So, dear students, we discussed today about what geography is. It is an integrating discipline and it is mostly concerned about what, why and where of the phenomena. It is also concerned about the human beings and their imprints on the surface of the earth, how humans have been affecting the earth and how earth in turn also affects the human. This spatial interaction is the concern of geography. Geography also has its interface with other branches of geography, other branches of social sciences and natural sciences. That makes the study of geography most interesting, and of course, it concerns all of us. Hello students, last time we discussed geography as a discipline, in which we talked about why should we study geography, what geography is and what is it concerned about. Besides, we also talked about the relationship of geography with other disciplines. Today we will be talking about different branches of geography. There are two main approaches to study geography. One is the systematic approach and other is the regional approach. The systematic approach was developed by Alexander von Humboldt, a German geographer, and the regional approach was also developed by a German geographer, Karl Ritter. These two approaches are the ways to study different aspects of branches of geography. Now, if we have a look at this diagram, you can see that The branches of geography based on the systematic approach are physical principles or philosophy of geography, methods and techniques of geography, and human geography. Now, so far as the classification is concerned, how we basically do in systematic and how is it different from that of regional geography is that in the systematic approach, a phenomena is studied world over as a whole, and then identification of typologies or spatial patterns are done. In the regional approach, the world is divided into different regions at different hierarchical levels, and then all the geographical phenomena in a particular region are studied. If we come back to this diagram, the branches of geography based on the systematic approach are physical geography, and the aspects which we study here, you can see one is geomorphology, climatology, hydrology, and soil geography. In the principles and philosophy of geography, we study about geographical thought, human ecology, land and human interaction is part of human ecology here. In the human geography, which is the other facet of based on the systematic approach, we have social and cultural geography, population and settlements, and economic geography. There is historical and political geography as well. In the population and settlements, we talk about the rural and urban geography, and in the rural and urban as well, we have different aspects, for example, migration and other aspects of the human nature. There are also methods and techniques by which we study geography, which we say are the cartography and the field techniques. So far as physical geography is concerned, it is mainly devoted to study of geomorphology, which we study landforms, their evolution, how they are related to the processes of their evolution. For example, if we see mountains, how they have evolved over a period of time. Then there is climatology, in which we study about the structure of the atmosphere, the elements of weather and climate, and climatic types world over, and how one region climatically differs from the other. There is also the other branches which we study in the physical geography is hydrology, which is concerned about the realms of water, and soil geography, which is devoted to the processes of soil formation. So far as human geography is concerned, human geography mostly considers the social and cultural geography, which encompasses the study of the society and its spatial dynamics. Population and settlement geography studies population growth, distribution, density, sex ratio, migration, occupational structure, and settlement geography studies about the characteristics of rural and urban settlements. In the economic geography, which is also part of human geography, we study about the people, their trades, agriculture, industry, tourism, and other aspects. These all aspects take us to the other facets of geography as well. If we have a close look at other diagram, here we talk about the branches of geography based on regional approach. In that we see regional studies, regional development, regional analysis, and regional planning. In the regional planning, we have country and town planning, and in the regional studies, we can have studies at different levels: micro, meso, and the macro level. These all aspects are covered in different. So far as the branches of geography are concerned on the regional approach, we have these things in our mind. And the most important thing is the field survey methods which we use in geography to study with respect to techniques, and we have GPS and remote sensing techniques which help us to analyze the geographical phenomena. So, let me sum up today. What we have studied is the different branches of geography. It depends on the approaches we use for study of geography. The main approaches are systematic and regional approaches, and on the basis of that, different branches of geography have been enumerated.
Welcome viewers, I am Mamta. Today we will be doing chapter 3 of class 11th, which is the basis of human behavior. Today we will be covering the topic of evolution, and we will be moving on to the biological basis of behavior. Let's start with the concept of evolution. Now, if you think of our ancestors, how we evolved from the time of chimpanzees, what were the differences that we have been able to come across from that time to now, you will be able to understand the whole process of evolution. Think about Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. Now, he basically talked about how the survival of the fittest ensures which species is going to continue and what features of behavior, biological as well as emotional, are going to continue in the future. Let's talk about the definition of evolution. Evolution refers to the orderly and gradual biological changes across generations. So, when we talk about the changes through which we have come across, the changes we have got from our ancestors, there are basically three major changes. First, there is a straight posture that we have. The chimpanzees used to have a stoop posture, which kept on becoming straight over the generations. So, now we have a straight posture. Second is the brain structure as well as the brain size. Now, our brain size and the brain structure is much larger than the rest of the body weight, and compared to the brain has a lot of structures within it. So, that is one major feature. Along with that, in the brain itself, our cerebrum or the cerebral cortex, the cerebral hemisphere, is one of the biggest and the most important ones in humans. In animals, it's very smaller portion of it, of the brain, and less important, but for humans it's the most developed, and that is why human species are considered to be the most intelligent. Third feature talks about the way we hold things. It's a very precise movement that we have, and it's not a gross one like animals used to do. That is the use of a refined thumb. That is the third major important feature. That's about the concept of evolution. Now, if you think about the nomads, they were basically in the jungles, they were basically in the forest, and they were working with whatever was coming across. They started with the stone and the fire. They started adapting to the environment. So now our adaptability has increased from that time onwards to now. Whatever features were important for us based on our survival have been continued in our genetic structures, and we have imbibed the best of it all. Let's move on to the second topic, which is biological basis of behavior. Now, when we talk about the biological basis particularly, we are dealing with the brain, the body, and the systems of the body. Now, in this particular chapter, we are going to cover two major things. One is the biological aspect of our behavior. The second is the cultural feature. Now, you might be thinking that why are we studying biology in psychology? And it's basically not just a part of science, but because psychology is also a science, that's why we are studying the concept of biology in psychology. Because only when we understand our body can we understand our behavior, because the body influences the behavior. So, this is the biological basis of behavior, in which we are basically trying to understand the concept of neurons in this particular topic. And we'll also be going on to culture a little later, which deals with how biology, our genetic basis, as well as our environment balances out our behavior. Now, neurons, when we talk about in biological basis, basically are the nerve cells. They are the specialized nerve cells which are very, very unique, and we have around 12 billion nerve cells or neurons in our brain. Now, every neuron is empowered to get information from outside stimuli through the sense organs, reaches the brain cell, and from that brain cell transmits itself to the rest of the nervous system. It can be to one neuron, the one which is required for that action. It could also be to a number of neurons. And that is like an interconnected network that you have even in your computers, the wires that you have which are interconnected, through which the messages transmit. Similarly, the brain has an interconnected set of neurons. Now, every neuron has three major components, and it also has electrical activity as well as a chemical activity, which we'll just understand. Now, when any information starts on into a nerve cell, so suppose I touch a hot object, that will be a simple reflex action that will not require my brain. But if I have to do a maths problem, in that case I am getting a stimulus from outside. Stimulus has energy, any outside event has energy. That information passes on to the brain, and the neuron basically will be starting on with the nerve receptors, which are the beginning part of the neuron called the dendrites. These are the tree-like structures which receive the information from the stimulus. Now, once they receive the information, it passes on to the soma, which is the cell body. Now, this cell body also has the nucleus for processing and synthesizing the protein and the reproduction of the cells. From the soma, or the center, the cell of the body, the information passes on to a thread-like structure which is known as the axon. Now, this is a rope-like structure. Once the information starts off, it will not stop till the time it has reached its final destination. Either the information will not start, the neurons will not fire, or the nerve potential will not start itself if the stimulus energy is weak. But if the stimulus energy is appropriate and optimal, once the neurons have started firing, it will reach its final destination. So that principle is known as all or none principle. So once neuron starts, it goes on till the end. That is the all or none principle. Now, once the information has reached the central part, which is known as the axon, the rope-like structure, this information travels through the strength or the length of the axon and reaches towards the end. The end is known as the axon terminal or the axon point, the axon tip, and it is also known as the terminal button. Now, this terminal button has chemicals stored in it. Once the nerve impulse has, the electrical part has reached the terminal buttons, the chemicals stored in the terminal button is known as a neurotransmitter. It will be released into a gap. So, every neuron has a gap. One neuron ending does not join the other neuron beginning. So, the axon point or the terminal button and the dendrite of the other neuron do not join. There is a gap in between, which we call as a synaptic cleft. So, the functional connection between the two, one neuron ending, the other neuron beginning, is known as a synapse. So, here the chemical will be released. This chemical ensures your behavior. If you are over anxious, it's because of this chemical. If you are not really working on something, you're lazy, it's again because of the brain chemical being released in this particular synaptic cleft. So, this is the whole process of neuron transmission. Okay, now we continue with the next topic, which is about the different kind of nerves which coordinate from the sense organs to the brain functioning. We have two major kinds of nerves, sensory nerves and motor nerves. The sensory nerves basically are known as afferent nerves, AFFERENT. Now, these nerves have a major function of transmitting information from outside environment, taking on through the sense organs route to the brain. So, suppose I am writing something or I touch something, the information will travel on from the sense organ, will reach the brain. So, sense organ to the brain is known as afferent nerves or sensory nerves. Now, after the information has reached the brain, it will be processed. After the processing, there will be an action outside to the stimulus. So, this action will be from the motor nerves, the glands and the muscles to the outside environment. Now, that is known as efferent nerves, EFFERENT. These nerves ensure that all the decisions are taken appropriately, because once the information is taken on from the sense organ, from the outside environment, from the stimuli, That information travels on through the sense organs, reaches the brain, processed. So that is the afferent nerves, processed, and then a decision taken through the glands and the muscles. There's an outside action. That is known as efferent nerves or the motor nerves, EFFERENT. That's about the nerves. Now we have the concept which is about the brain structure. So this concept talks about the nervous system particularly. Now if you know about our brain, it's a very sophisticated system. It's an automatic system which is working. And also if you look at anybody whose brain has stopped functioning, you can imagine what will happen to that person. If somebody is declared brain dead, it's very difficult to do anything else then. The vital functions of the body are totally collapsing. The person is losing its major, areas of decision making, thinking, reasoning, alertness. So in a way you can say if the brain is functioning well, the whole body is functioning because every system of the body is coordinated through the brain. So that's why this system is very, very important, and it's very important also to take care of it. So regular diet as well as exercise, as well as even, if you talk about Sudoku, a mind game, a mind puzzle, even that research has shown that it continues. If you keep on working with your brain, that keep on energizing and exercising with it, automatically your brain cells are reviving themselves, and such people have been living longer with a healthy brain functioning. So the problems of old age are then catered to. The people do not have amnesia or memory problems. People do not have problems where they are not able to understand or do things at the old stage of their life. So brain structure is very, very important for us to understand. That is the reason why we are trying to know what are the various structures and what are the various functions of the brain and how can that be optimized to the maximum limit. Now, this basically is the beginning point of the nervous system, because now we'll be talking about the structure and the function of the nervous system. Now, the nervous system basically has two major parts. One part is known as the peripheral nervous system. The other part is known as the central nervous system. Central nervous system again comprises of two major parts, the brain and the spinal cord, whereas the peripheral nervous system comprises of majorly somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Let's start with the peripheral nervous system. Now, peripheral nervous system basically deals with the major nerves, again talking about the nerves, in which they are coordinating with all the nerves except that of the brain and the spinal cord. Now, the peripheral nervous system, when we talk about the somatic part of it, somatic nerves are 31 in number, 31 sets, having the mixed sensory and motor nerves. And similar to that, we have the cranial nerves, which are 15 in number. Now, these cranial nerves also have the similar function of sensory, the sensory neurons, the sensory nerves, the motor neurons, and the mixed neurons. Now, they deal with all the aspects of the nerve system, that means transmitting information from the rest of the body. When we talk about the somatic nerves, the cranial nerves only work with the head region. So, the information which is sensory or motor is only dealt with by the cranial nerves of the head, whereas the somatic nerves deals with all over the body except the brain and the spinal cord. Now, we have the aspect which is known as the autonomic nervous system, the second part of peripheral nervous system. Peripheral, if you understand, is at the boundary. So, boundary means all the nerves in the body which transmit information and pass on the information to the brain. So, when we talk about the autonomic, which is a very important part of the brain, and that deals with the aspect of involuntary functions, all the functions which are life supporting, functions like blood pressure, heartbeat, which are functioning on its own. If you think about the yogis who used to sit and meditate for so many hours, they were able to control their autonomic system, they were able to control their automatic function, the basic survival function, the vital function of the body, like breathing, like heart rate, like blood circulation. So, that system calms down when we are relaxed, and that is pushed up when we are stressed out. So, therefore, this system has two major parts. One is the sympathetic nervous system, which is the emergency or the crisis intervention center, where it's like, immediately a situation is outside, there's a dog which comes when I am driving and I have to apply the brake. That is the time when sympathetic nervous system is activated. So, all the major body parts which have to take an action, like muscles are activated, all the blood is flowing from the stomach to the muscles, and that's why the major organs start functioning actively, like the heart starts beating up faster, tear glands are activated, salivation is inhibited, sweating starts off. So all these ensure that the action is taken. It's a fight or flight reaction. You either deal with it, confront. The hormone here is adrenaline, which is released. So you fight it out or you run away from that situation. Whereas when this situation is over and the body has to calm down, parasympathetic nervous system takes over. This system is the relaxing part, so resting and digesting part. Now the stomach function, the digestive function can go back to normal. The blood is restored back into the stomach. Now I'll just compare the two systems. Let's look at the screen. Sympathetic nerves dilates the pupils, opposite of that constricts the pupils, which is parasympathetic. The two work in tandem, the two work in balance. It's not that one is anti of another, the two work in balance. Again, inhibiting salivation, stimulating saliva, opposite again, heartbeat function, opposite again, and stomach function we've already discussed. Now this is precisely a very important part of the chapter which we've covered today, basically dealing with the concept of evolution and moving on from evolution to understand how our neurons work, and moving on from there about the peripheral nervous system, which majorly have the somatic and the autonomic, which we just covered in autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic part of the chapter. That's about it for today. Thank you. Welcome viewers, I'm Mamta. Today we'll be doing chapter 3 of class 11th, which is the basis of human behavior. Let's continue the chapter. We have today the concept of nervous system, particularly the central nervous system. Central, as the name suggests, a very important part of the brain structure of the nervous system, which basically deals with three aspects of the nervous system. First, it talks about the hindbrain. Looking at the diagram, you will be able to identify the hindbrain having three parts in it. First part, which is known as the medulla oblongata. Medulla is basically a very important part. It deals with the major life sustaining and life supporting functions. All the vital automatic functions, involuntary internal functions are supported by this very important structure of the brain known as the medulla oblongata. It's a connection between the spinal cord on one end and the midbrain on the another end. This is a very important aspect because it helps the person maintain an automaticity so that people can be involved with their normal cognitive functioning, thinking related functioning, memory, reasoning related functioning, and not just focus on automatic functioning. Think for a minute, if your heartbeat stops, what will happen? You'll suddenly face so much discomfort. You might lose your life. So that is where your focus is ensured on your task that you're doing, and it's something like, if you visualize it like having a button that you switch on or you switch off and your functions will start running, but that is not there. It is basically automatic. That is the difference. It's a machine which is working but on its own, regulated by the medulla. Second part is known as the pons. Now very interesting part because it is dealing with a connection again. One side we have the medulla and the other side we have the midbrain. So pons has a very important part dealing with the fact, it tries and controls a lot of functions actually. One is dealing with the sleeping mechanism, the dreaming mechanism. Research has shown that pons is associated with. It even controls the respiratory mechanism of people. It also controls the internal mechanisms of the body. So in a way, pons is a part of the brain, hindbrain, which is very important again in controlling various kinds of function, very different kinds of functions actually. Third part is again a very interesting part known as cerebellum. Now this part, cerebrum as such, is actually a motor part, because if we talk about riding a bicycle, driving a bike, it could be dancing, any motor function, any memory associated with the motor function is controlled by the cerebrum. Now this part basically deals with a lot of functions of motor coordination. So if a person is not able to maintain a balance, that's because of this particular part. If a person is not able to have equilibrium in the body, a balance in the body, so let's say while walking, I'm not able to maintain a stiff posture, my brain is not giving me the right message to the hands or to the legs to take a step, the next step, then there is a problem with this motor part of the brain. Next we have the midbrain. Now the midbrain basically tries and controls through the reticular activating system, the RAS, which is basically dealing with the arousal and sleep mechanism. So we fall off to sleep because of this RAS system, reticular activating system, and we are alert when we are doing a particular task, we are aware, we are attentive. That's because of the system known as a RAS. Third part of the nervous system, the central nervous system, is known as this frontal brain. Now this is the forebrain, which comprises of different important parts rather. The forebrain is in fact the most important and the most developed, which makes humans very, very intelligent. Now for the forebrain, the first and the most important part we have is known as the hypothalamus. Now hypothalamus is actually a very small part but has a major function. In fact, it can be also called as a small brain in itself. It has so many functions which are so important. First major function, it controls your motivation level. If I don't feel like doing anything, I'm not interested in something, I am not able to maintain my energy for a particular task, there is a problem with the motivation, which hypothalamus controls. Hypothalamus also controls major, it's like it controls the pituitary or the master gland. So basically then hypothalamus controls all the hormonal secretions in the body. It regulates that. So think about how important hypothalamus is. It also controls the internal homeostasis, which basically means the body is working in a system of balance, of checks and balances. This system internally is controlled by the hypothalamus. Think about a time if you're not able to sweat. When we are in the AC, sitting in the AC, we are not sweating. So when we move out of the AC, suddenly we start sweating. So that is just to balance out the over sweating, is just to balance out the lack of sweating earlier. That's a body's homeostasis or the body's balance or equilibrium, which is maintained by the hypothalamus. It also controls the emotional part of our behavior. So basically, whenever we are feeling, let's say, too sleepy or we are not feeling like getting up, that is again controlled by the hypothalamus. So our basic needs, let's say hunger, thirst, these are also controlled, the basic needs are controlled by the hypothalamus, and also the emotional aspect of our behavior. Next we have is thalamus as a part of the forebrain. You know, if you talk about forebrain, think about the word fore, that means at the front. That means it's so important because it controls our major functioning of our brain. All the higher level mental processes, all the decisions that we take, all the thinking that we do, all the logic that we use, all the reasoning, all the attention that we give to a task, all the interpretation, judgment, perception, solving a problem, all of this is done by the forebrain. So think about how important it is, particularly for the human beings, to regulate their life. So second part that we have for the forebrain is known as a thalamus. Now thalamus is a relay station. It's like a radio station which takes on information from one end and transmits it to the other end. That is the role of the thalamus. So it collects the information from the rest of the body, transmits it to the brain. That's the relay station's work. So whatever information from the stimulus comes on to the spinal cord or to the brain, it decides to which center the information has to be sent. Is it to be sent to the auditory center? Is it to be sent to any other center? What kind of processing is required? What kind of decision is to be taken? That's what thalamus role is. And also it tries to control the autonomic systems of the body. Again, like the pawns, the internal mechanisms of the body, the automatic functions is what it controls also. Third aspect of the forebrain is a very important feature known as the limbic system. Now the limbic system works in coordination with the hypothalamus. It has two parts. One part which controls the emotions aspect, which is known as the amygdala. The other part known as the hippocampus, which is controlling the memory part. So all the long-term memory is stored in the hippocampus, whereas all the emotional aspects of the mind is stored in the amygdala. Now it works in coordination with the hypothalamus and it tries and controls the aspect of all the major functions of the body also. Then we move on to the next part, which is a very, very important part in the brain functioning and the most important part of the forebrain also, known as the cerebrum. Now, cerebrum basically means the cerebral hemisphere. Now, we have two hemispheres, the right hemisphere on the right side of the body, brain, and we have the left hemisphere in the left side of the brain. Now, these two in fact serve two different functions. The right one is meant for all the artistic abilities, the spatial abilities, all the expressive and the creative abilities. So, think about people who are left-handers, their right side of the brain is functioning. Left side of the body is functioning and right side of the brain is functioning. It works in opposition. Similarly, most of the people who are right-handers, their left side of the brain is functioning, left cerebral hemisphere is functioning. Now, most of the people, because they are right-handers, they are using the right side of their body and the brain, but the left side of their brain. So, such people in fact are very comfortable with everything, but the beauty of it all is when we talk about the left-handers, in fact, a lot of times in society, people are discouraged to be left-handers, saying that, if you eat from a left hand or if you write from a left hand, it doesn't really look good. You don't gel with other people, you don't, are in association with the way other people behave. But in fact, such tendency should be encouraged, because a left-hander basically means that the right side of the brain is functioning very well, the spatial ability is functioning very well, the creative ability is functioning very well, the artistic ability is functioning very well. And if such children are discouraged from their natural tendency to use the left part of their body, they in fact develop a problem. They might end up being slow learners, they might affect the development of their brain, they might affect their intelligence level. And they are much more intelligent because both the sides of the brain are functioning. Obviously, when we talk about language development, which is there in most of the people who are right-handers, working with the left side of the brain. So, left side deals with the language development, right side deals with artistic abilities. So, for the left-handers, both the sides are functioning. That's why children should not be discouraged or stopped from using their left side of their body, because it encourages the development of both the sides. In fact, even if you want to develop the left side of your body, you can write with the left hand. Obviously, you will not be able to write perfectly like a left-hander, but that will develop the right side of your brain, which is artistic or creative. You can try that, it really helps. Okay, this aspect of the forebrain, which we call as a cerebral hemisphere, the two hemispheres are joined together by corpus callosum. There's a myelinated sheath, myelinated neurons, which are a part of, it's like a bridge which is bridging the two hemispheres, the right and the left hemisphere. Now, we have four important lobes in this part. We have one of the most important lobes we call as the frontal lobe. Now, frontal lobe basically controls all the cognitive functions, all the higher mental related processes, all the major decision making, all the memory related processes, perception, attention, problem solving, judgment, all the major processes are controlled by frontal lobe. So, people who are normally calm and quiet, in fact, because frontal lobe even inhibits the emotional arousal. So, such people are very cool-headed, they are very intelligent and wise, they take the right decision. But that doesn't mean that our frontal lobe is not activated. Of course, it is activated, but for some people, it is much more activated. That was the frontal lobe. Second, we have the temporal lobe. So, temporal deals with the auditory functions. We hear out certain things, we formulate those memories, it stays with us. That is what is the function of the temporal lobe, the hearing auditory function. Then we have the parietal lobe, which works with the sensory motor abilities. Now, all the sensory motor functioning is being controlled by the parietal lobe. So, all the different sense organs, all the different cues that we get. Suppose I am walking, my sense organs are giving the message about, is there danger outside which I need to avoid? Is there a hole which I have to avoid? That is all the function of the parietal lobe. Then we have the last one, which is known as the occipital lobe. That controls the vision function. So, in every behavior of yours, we are using all the four lobes. Of course, we have to make a decision. Of course, we have to look around with our vision. Of course, we have to use our sense organs. Of course, we have to use our hearing. So, four lobes are very, very important. Last concept that we have is the spinal cord. Now, spinal cord as such has two major functions. One is compiling the information from the rest of the sense organs and then passing it out to the brain. And the second major function is about the reflex action. And that has been there right from the time of evolution for survival. So reflex action protects us in a variety of ways. And it's like an inbuilt mechanism. It's a genetic feature. It is not something that we learn. It's inbuilt. It's an inbuilt inherited mechanism that we carry on over generations. Suppose a small child is touching a hot iron. What will be the ideal response? Immediately we'll pull back the hand. So the information will not even need to travel to the neurons. It will immediately be taken back by the spinal cord. Or if I'm blinking my eye, that's a simple reflex action, so that I'm avoiding any kind of, suppose there's something on my eye and I have to blink. So automatic reaction. There's no thinking happening. There is no message being communicated to the brain. So spinal cord is a very quick action, immediate information transmitted and a result or a reaction, very quick without any thinking, very automatic, very inbuilt. That is about the spinal cord, which majorly has a bundle, a network of neurons, and these neurons are the association neurons which associates different paths, and this aspect has the white matter as compared to the gray matter of the brain. That's about the spinal cord. Let's summarize. We have tried to understand today the major aspect of the central nervous system. We tried to cover the hindbrain having 3 parts. Then we moved on to the midbrain and we moved on to the forebrain in the final phase. Forebrain again having very important parts, and along with the brain in the central nervous system, we understood the spinal cord. That's about it for today. Thank you. Welcome viewers, I'm Mamta. Today we'll be doing chapter 3 of class 11th, which is the basis of human behavior. Today we'll be talking about the concept of endocrine system. Now endocrine system basically deals with the functioning of the hormones in our body. If hormones are released, are they released in appropriate amount? Then it's perfectly fine. In case they are released in lesser amount due to some problem in the brain and the body, or a higher amount, then there's a problem, because then it will develop some or the other kind of disease and it will affect our functioning and behavior. And also hormones are released at certain times of the body. There are some hormones which are released all through the life, particularly right from childhood, like the growth hormone. Obviously if it stops, the child will remain stunted in growth, in all kinds of development. There are some other kinds of hormones which are released at particular times of the body. They start their release from that particular time. For example, the gonadotropic hormone starts with puberty, 10 to 14 years of age. Also, endocrine system is basically known as the ductless gland. Ductless means, like glands, they do not have any tube or wires through which the hormones are secreted. It is ductless because they are secreted directly into the bloodstream. Now, the first endocrine system, the first gland that we have to cover today is basically talking about the pituitary gland. The pituitary is the most important gland. That is why it is known as the master gland. Now, pituitary works in conjunction with the hypothalamus. So, hypothalamus gives out the message to the anterior pituitary, and from anterior pituitary, the rest of the particular hormones are released. And there is a concept known as a stimulating hormone. So every hormone system, every particular hormone has a stimulating hormone associated with it. We'll talk about the stimulating hormone, which talks about basically the aspect that once the message goes on from the hypothalamus to the pituitary, from the pituitary to that particular gland which has to release its hormone, will be done through the stimulating hormone. It will stimulate the hormone to release the hormone in the body. Pituitary as such is a growth hormone. It deals with the growth in the body, and that's the master gland, so obviously it controls all the aspects of the body. Second gland that we have to cover is known as the thyroid gland. Now, thyroid gland is basically in the throat. This gland deals with the energy level, the metabolism level, the growth level. So, in case when we see anybody who is too fat, who puts on a lot of weight, maybe because of the fact that a lot of this thyroxine, the hormone associated with the thyroid gland, and TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, are resulting in a problem. So, if there are two kinds of deficits and problems, one is where the person loses a lot of weight, and as a result of that the person will be overactive, and the other category where the person puts on a lot of weight, and that is a category which will be a lot of lethargy is going to be there. So, problem with weight gain and with weight loss, along with which energy level, mood level, lethargy level, hormonal disturbances, lots of problems, complication result because of thyroid. You might have heard of this term thyroid. People having it result having this problem. That's about the metabolism for thyroid gland. We have the next one, which is the pancreas. Now, a lot of people who are suffering from diabetes, a very severe problem with the body where major organs of the body start deteriorating. It's a very difficult problem because there's no cure and people have to take injections of insulin. So that means even if the body is generating insulin, it is not really digesting the food or the blood sugar or the glucose level. So that's a very delicate balance. Now, a lot of people think just by eating sugar, they will develop diabetes. It is not so. Nowadays, because of lifestyle problems, it is basically resulting from stress. So the moment there is stress in the body, immediate flush of hormones is there in the bloodstream and all the body organs start working actively. And if that situation is chronic, because people today are stressed out all the time. So think about the damage being done to the body. All the major glands, all the major organs are overworking, working more than their capacity. So ultimately they start deteriorating faster. So pancreas and diabetes with insulin, because of insulin secretion which is abnormal, either too much or too less. As a result, it can even affect the brain functioning because people can go into coma. When the blood sugar is not there in the brain, it is not being digested. In fact, the body will start storing a lot of fat also, and it will release a lot of fat also, which is called as a glycogen. From the liver, it will start overworking. So that is about pancreas, release of insulin resulting in diabetes if not properly secreted. Then we have the system of ovaries. Now this basically we have gonadotropic hormone in which we have two parts. One is for the females, which comprises in ovaries. When it releases the egg, there are two major hormones secreted here. One is known as the androgens and the other is known as the progesterone. Now, estrogen as such consists of primary sexual characteristics where the development starts off like the monthly cycle, like the hair growth, and secondary sexual characteristics also the major changes in the body for females, the cyclic pattern that they develop where the release of waste from the body starts on in the menses. So that is for the estrogen. Progesterone as such doesn't really have any major function in puberty, but yes, it prepares the uterus lining for the pregnancy or the conception, which develops at a later stage. For males, it's not really a cyclic pattern. Obviously, you've never heard of menses in males, so that's not a cyclic pattern, and the release of hormone is testosterone. So there we talk about the concept of aggression. The level of aggression is much higher. The level of energy is much higher in males. That is because of the testosterone, and that also develops their primary and secondary sexual characteristics, which also comprise of the bodily changes, the growth, the height, the weight, and the physical features of the males. So all that is about the two different hormones that we had to cover. Then we have the last hormone, which we call as the adrenal glands. Now adrenal comprises of two parts again. One is the adrenal medulla, the other is adrenal cortex. Adrenal cortex releases ACTH as a stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Now, the major function of this hormone, although it starts from anterior pituitary to ACTH and then it releases the hormone of corticoids. Now, cortisol and corticoids are working for maintaining the sodium-potassium balance in the body. Now, a lot of people get hospitalized if the balance is not maintained. So that can be very, very threatening to the functioning of the nervous system. a very simple mineral, potassium and sodium, but if there's a deficit, it automatically damages the brain. So we have to be very careful that we are maintaining appropriate level of sodium and potassium in our diet or our intake. Second part of adrenal gland is known as the adrenal medulla. Again, a very important aspect. Like we have already covered the aspect of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system of autonomic nervous system. This is what is controlled by the adrenal medulla. Now, these hormones are secreted at the time of an emergency situation, a crisis where sympathetic nervous system activates itself. So, adrenaline is released, or epinephrine it is also known as. When you've heard of the term of adrenaline rush, somebody who goes out for a jog, somebody who does exercise or gymming, there's an adrenaline rush, a sudden flush of energy. Now, that flush of energy is because of the release of adrenaline or because of the release of this particular hormone. So, this hormone ensures, the epinephrine or adrenaline, which is known as, ensures that all the body systems suddenly have a lot of energy and are working very actively to deal with the situation outside. Once the situation is over, the system calms down, energy is conserved, and once the emergency situation is over, it's like a housekeeping which is putting back all the systems into normal functioning by the parasympathetic nervous system, or the release of the opposite of it, noradrenaline or norepinephrine. These are the two hormones for the adrenal medulla. Now, it's very important for the hormones to work correctly in appropriate order. Like a lot of times when females have to go for a gynecological check, at that time they ask for certain hormonal check to understand why the imbalance in the body, or any kind of blood test. You actually have to understand where is the hormonal disturbance, which is resulting in the change in your behavior, change in your emotions and change in your overall personality. So that is about the endocrine system. Now we have to move on to the genetic part of it, the last concept of biology in the chapter. Now, genetic system basically comprises of the chromosomes having a number of genes, and there's a concept of DNA into it. So when we talk about the concept of chromosomes, chromosomes are thread-like structures. These structures are basically comprising of a lot of genetic information, a lot of genetic command. So it is talking about two processes. One is genotype, the other is phenotype. Genotype is this genetic structure that we are talking about. Whatever characteristics are stored as commands in our genes. So genes are like so many in number which are carrying that genetic code, which are carrying the genetic information as to how we are going to develop. So genotype is the genetic characteristic. Somebody might have a disease, but it may not develop. It's there in the genes, but it is recessive. So it does not develop, does not show into the physical characteristic. If it shows in the physical characteristic, whatever features show, suppose the child is having blue colored eyes, none of the parents are having it. It is basically because of the combination of genes which results in the physical characteristic. It could be the intelligence, it could be the color of the skin, it could be the color of the hair, it could be the height. All these which are manifested in the outside characteristic are known as the phenotype. What is there in the genes is known as a genotype. So that's a very important concept if we talk about the dictator of an organism's development. Now, this whole study that we are discussing is known as genetics. The hereditary study, the inheritance study, the way the genes are transmitted. A lot of people go in for genetic counseling before giving birth to a child, because a lot of time the diseases are running in the family. So the parents are really worried that is my child also going to have this kind of disease because it has been there in the genes. That is where genetic counseling comes into picture. Now, this whole hereditary component in fact is again one part of our behavior and personality. We'll be talking about the other part a little later, which is about the culture. Every chromosome has a number of genes in it. So number of genetic codes which are going to govern the behavior, which are going to ensure what kind of look you have, what kind of behavior you're going to show, what kind of personality you're going to have. Now, if the DNA structure, like you might have heard of the DNA testing, a lot of children want to know who their parents are, or the parents have to testify in court that this is my child or not my child. So that is what is done by DNA testing. So DNA is again a component within the chromosome, within the genes. That DNA deoxyribonucleic acid, which tells us about the genetic basis, is it matching between the child genes and the parents' genes. Now, also at the time of conception, 46 pairs of genes are inherited. The 23rd chromosome inherits 46 pair of genes, 23 from the parent, the father, and 23 from the mother. Now, a lot of people also have this misconception that, when a boy is born, it's something like a celebration in the family. But if the girl is born, it's a problem with the female. There is something wrong in the female. But when we talk about the biological aspect of it, we realize that it is the father's contribution more to the genetic setup which results and determine the gender. So out of the 46 chromosome that is inherited on the 23rd chromosome, the 46 chromosome which are there, 23 are given by the mother and the rest 23 are contributed by the father. Now, the mother's contribution is the X chromosome, whereas the father's contribution is the Y or the X. So, XX pair for the mother, the female, which is released from the ovary, and the sperm, from the sperm, which is again the 23 aspects. Here we have XY. Now, if suppose there's a combination of X and X, the girl will be born. But in case the Y from the father, the Y chromosome from the father, and from the mother the X, that will be the boy. So, it is not just because of the female that the gender is determined, but basically because of the father that the gender is determined. We also have a concept, a very interesting one, known as mutation. Now, when you look back into history, when there was bomb blasting done on Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the genetic code, the genetic pattern was changed. The genes were altered because of the environmental pollutants, the radiation. So, any kind of bomb blast, any kind of radiation being released can result in a damage into the genes. So, a lot of children who were born with a lot of deformities, and that has continued even till this date. It is very difficult to rectify the damage and the change in the structure of the genes once it is done. It can also be done for the positive. The mutation concept basically says the change of gene structure for the positive or for the negative. So, winding up today, summarizing, today we tried to understand the endocrine system, that is the hormonal setup that we have, along with which the way our genes are comprised of, their structure and how it works. That's about it for today. Thank you.
One of the most vital discoveries made by man, a discovery that made a difference between darkness and light, or even life and death. The flame was perhaps one of the first chemical reactions recognized, controlled and harnessed by man, a chemical reaction in which energy is released in the form of heat and light. Every single example of flame that we see here begins with carbon or a carbon compound. The carbon compound, such as methane, combines with oxygen in the air to produce an oxide of carbon, that is carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, along with water. And each of these reactions results in the liberation of energy in the form of heat and light. Such chemical reactions in which heat is released along with the formation of products are known as the exothermic reactions. However, for an exothermic reaction to occur, it is not necessary that we have only carbon or its compound as one of the reactants. Let us perform an experiment to prove this. Wasn't that dramatic? The reaction of sodium metal with water is an exothermic reaction, that is, a reaction in which heat is released. This experiment should be carried out very carefully because the piece of sodium metal can splutter when dropped into water, and to prevent this, we should take a very small piece of sodium metal for this experiment. In fact, sodium metal is very reactive. It reacts even with a trace of moisture present around, and for this very reason, it is always stored under kerosene or coated with wax. The reaction of sodium metal with water is an exothermic reaction, that is, a reaction in which heat is released. There are reactions of the opposite kind. These are the reactions in which energy is absorbed in the form of heat. These reactions are called endothermic reactions. Let us observe one such reaction. Now let's take some citric acid into the conical flask. And measure its temperature. It's 16 degrees Celsius. And now let's add some baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, commonly used at our homes. Are you observing the reaction occurring? Brisk effervescence are coming out. And now let's also see what's the temperature. So we can say the temperature is 12.5 degrees Celsius. And as the temperature has come down during this reaction, this indicates that heat was absorbed during the reaction between citric acid and sodium bicarbonate, and hence this is a endothermic reaction. Now let us observe few more interesting examples of exothermic and endothermic reactions. All these experiments can be carried out very easily in the chemistry lab of your school. Observe each of the experiment very carefully, particularly the precautions being taken. Let us observe a reaction between ethanoic acid and sodium carbonate now. Ethanoic acid is commonly used as vinegar at home, also known as acetic acid, and sodium carbonate is used as washing soda. Let's take the temperature, and the temperature of ethanoic acid is 20 degrees Celsius. Now let's see what happens when we add sodium carbonate, the washing soda. Again brisk effervescence. And what about the temperature? The temperature has risen. It is 21 degrees Celsius. This means that heat was evolved during the reaction between ethanoic acid and sodium carbonate. Hence, this is an exothermic reaction. Let us now observe a reaction between calcium oxide, that is quicklime or chuna that we use for whitewashing, with water. So much heat is generated during the reaction that water starts boiling. It is an exothermic reaction. Let's do one more reaction. We have dilute hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide. Dilute hydrochloric acid in the conical flask and sodium hydroxide in the beaker. Let's take the temperature. The temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. We should always wash the thermometer before dipping into another solution. And the temperature of sodium hydroxide, it is also 20 degrees Celsius. Now, let's mix the base with the acid and measure the temperature. I can feel the conical flask getting warm, and the temperature is rising very sharply. It has moved to 36 degrees Celsius. That means, again, the heat was evolved during the reaction, and the reaction of hydrochloric acid, which is a strong acid, with the base is an exothermic reaction. Now, let us observe another reaction between potassium permanganate and glycerine. Before doing the reaction, we'll have to powder potassium permanganate so that the reaction is fast. Look, it has caught fire. It is a very dangerous experiment, and under no circumstances you should carry it out alone without your teacher's assistance. The burning or oxidation of a metal is also an exothermic reaction. Let's observe burning of magnesium ribbon. Magnesium ribbon always hold the ribbon away from you. See how it burns with a dazzling white flame, forming ashes of magnesium oxide. Never look directly into the flame of burning magnesium. We have observed a number of exothermic reactions. Now let us observe some endothermic reactions. Endothermic reactions are relatively less common. The reaction between potassium chloride and ammonium nitrate is an endothermic reaction. Let us mix the two salts, potassium chloride and ammonium nitrate, and stir and observe the change in temperature. As the reaction is between two solids, we have to take care that the two reactants are nicely powdered. And to enhance the reaction, we can add a drop or two of water. The beaker has become too cold to touch. Now let us observe what's the change in temperature. The temperature has already dipped to approximately -2 degrees Celsius. It is an endothermic reaction. Let us try another experiment. This time we will take barium hydroxide and ammonium nitrate in the ratio 2:1. The temperature of barium hydroxide powder is 17 degrees Celsius. The temperature of ammonium nitrate is also 17 degrees Celsius. Let us mix the two powders and observe what happens. Barium hydroxide and ammonium nitrate in the ratio 2:1. Stir the mixtures and observe what happens. The beaker is becoming cold. The temperature has already dropped to below -10 degrees Celsius. It's an endothermic reaction. We have seen certain reactions which are exothermic and others which are endothermic. Some of them were really spectacular, isn't it? Now we should understand why heat is absorbed or evolved during a reaction. For this, we should first try and understand how a reaction occurs. During a chemical reaction, atoms of one element do not change into those of another element, nor do atoms disappear from the mixture or appear from elsewhere? Actually, chemical reactions involve the breaking and then reformation of bonds between atoms to produce new substances. Let us take the example of the complete combustion of a carbon compound, methane. Methane combines with oxygen, producing carbon dioxide and water. The methane molecule consists of a carbon atom bonded to 4 hydrogen atoms. Oxygen has 2 oxygen atoms bonded to each other by a double bond. During the reaction of methane with oxygen, carbon-hydrogen bonds of methane break and oxygen-oxygen bonds of oxygen also break. Then, new bonds are formed between carbon-oxygen and hydrogen-oxygen to give the products of the reaction. To break a bond, that is, to pull 2 atoms apart, energy is required, whereas when the 2 atoms combine together, energy is released. Now, during a reaction, if the energy released is much more than the energy required to break the bond, the excess energy is released to the surroundings, and we call such a reaction as an exothermic reaction. On the other hand, there are reactions in which the energy required to break the bonds is much more than the energy released during formation of the bonds. In such reactions, the energy is absorbed from the surroundings, and so the temperature of the surroundings drops. Such reactions are the endothermic reactions. We have now understood why certain reactions are exothermic while others are endothermic. Let us briefly summarize what all we have learned. We have also observed many exothermic and endothermic reactions. Do learn to perform these experiments, but be extremely careful while handling apparatus and chemicals. And most importantly, do all these experiments under the supervision of your teacher only. Happy experimenting!
Good afternoon viewers, especially children. As we are all aware that NCERT has come out with the new textbook based on NCF 2005. Today we are going to discuss about science textbook of class 10th, where we will talk about chemical reactions and equations. So we are going to discuss this, and we have with us Dr. Alka Mehrotra and Professor R.S. Sindhu. I am Anjani Kaul from Department of Education in Science and Mathematics, NCERT. Before starting the discussion, let me briefly tell you what all is there in this particular chapter. Well, children, in class 7th and 8th, in class 9th, you are little aware about chemical changes, where in class 10th we are discussing about these chemical changes in detail. And apart from this, we will talk about balancing of equation, why we should balance equation, why balancing of equation is important. And then we will discuss about different chemical reactions such as combination reaction, decomposition reaction, double displacement reaction, oxidation reaction. And if you go through this chapter, you might have seen that we have tried to, relate the introduction related to the daily life situation. Before I exactly ask the question to one of our experts, I would like to throw some light on this, that for symbols and formulas, you have read till class 9th. In class 8th, you have you know more about word equation, whereas in class 9th, you are more aware about symbols and how to make formulas and all. Now, balancing of equation we have introduced first time in class 10th. So, before that I will ask Dr. Alka that since children, they are aware, little bit aware about chemical reactions till class 8, they have little idea, but can you please elaborate on this? What exactly are chemical reactions? Are these chemical changes?
Yes, of course, these are chemical changes, and these occur when some heat changes, some light comes out, and sometimes sound also is seen in that. But it is not necessary that always a chemical change will accompany these changes, and moreover physical changes also accompany these changes. So, sometimes it is difficult to find out the difference between chemical change and physical change. So, to do that, we should know little bit about from our intuition. For example, if I say that food ripes, so there is always difference in the color of the fruit, unripe fruit, and color of the ripened food. So, from the color change we can say that there is chemical change. Similarly, if we say that this thing has burnt out and has become black, then also we can easily say that it is chemical change. But if I tear the paper and I would say I can't bring that back into the original form, then it is very difficult to say whether it is a chemical change or a physical change. In that situation, we have to decide how we should decide that it is a physical change or a chemical change. For that, we should know that whether the substance as such is changing, or some bonds are breaking into it, or some bonds are being formed into it. And if we know this thing in detail, then we can say that yes, of course, it is chemical change or a physical change. Apparently, it seems that tearing the paper is a chemical change, because we can't bring back the paper in original form so simply, and in general we classify physical change and chemical change in such a manner that we say that physical change is such a change in which we can bring about the original form of the substance.
This means, can I interrupt you here? This means that while you are talking about a paper, you said, you gave this example right now. If I say that we have a paper, and the way you said if you tear it, this means this is a physical change, because we have not changed the state of that particular substance. But if I say if I burn it, then what do you think, that is this if I burn it and it will become a black in color, so then is it a chemical change or a physical change?
Of course, it is a chemical change, because now it has changed into a new substance, that is carbon. In paper, sugar molecules are in a linear chain, which children will learn in the higher classes, not now, and that change, by tearing the paper, that change is not taking place in the chain length. But when we talk about burning of the paper, that becomes black, because now it changes into carbon. So, that is of course a chemical change, that is not a physical change.
Okay, the way I said in the beginning that Professor Sindhu, since you are the coordinator of textbooks of upper primary stage, you're very well you know that children are aware about word equation till class 8th. and in class 9th we are first time introducing symbols and formulas. Now, what I would like to ask you that when first time when you are doing it in the classroom, this particular balancing of an equation, first of all I would like to know, do you think that we have to balance the equation?
Yes, we have to balance equation, because we know that mass can't be destroyed or created. So that that is a sort of conservation of mass is there. So when substances react with one substance reacts with another substance, so products, mass of products, some mass of product would be equal to the some mass of reactants. So that is needed, or in another way we can say that types of atoms on both sides, one particular type of one particular type of atoms on both sides should remain the same. So naturally then mass would remain conserved.
Yeah, very nicely you have said that about that reactants should be equal to products, but this means that you are talking about law of conservation of mass, which I think children they have already learnt in class 9. So it will be easier for them to understand what exactly is balancing of an equation. I think that is why deliberately we have left some equations in between unbalanced. Why we have left these equations unbalanced? So that once a child will understand how to balance an equation, they can go back to those equations and then balance them. Usually children think that why we have left this equation as such, we have not balanced that. We get that kind of feedback sometimes, but we have raised that question that this equation is not balanced. This means that children should try to balance it since they have now learnt it. Now, sir, usually when we write an equation, which we have said in our textbook, that put a square, don't write anything in the square, write somewhere on the other side, because at the end when we balance the equation, we remove this box, for easier way to learn. So, how a child should start actually, look for an element which has got maximum atoms, or how to start that?
So, first of all, we see in reactants and products which compound is having, which formula is having maximum number of atoms, and amongst those also which type of atom is having which type of element is having maximum atoms in that. So we start with that. First we start balancing the number of atoms which in a particular case which are maximum.
Okay.
So there are some cases, we can simply take example of reaction of iron with water. So Fe3O4 Fe reacts with H2O and it gives Fe3O4 plus H2. So then we can balance it. So in this case Fe3O4 is having maximum number of atoms, and in that oxygen, number of oxygen atoms is maximum. So we start balancing the number of oxygen atoms on both sides, and then we proceed further in balancing other elements and number of atoms of other elements.
Okay, when we once we balance the equation, then we try to write the physical states, in between the brackets we usually write physical states. Well, Dr. Mehrotra, do you think it is necessary to write these physical states in between the brackets? Is it necessary, or we can skip that? Or if it is necessary, why? If not, why?
If we write gases is G for gas, L for liquid, and S for solid, that means that we are telling the state. This is the thing, this is the convention that we do sometimes. But it is not always necessary to report all these things. If we write this is good, because then we are telling all these states, states of all the compounds, and in that situation we can get complete information about the substance. For example, if I am dissolving sodium sulphate in water, or I am reacting sodium sulphate with barium chloride solution, in that case I know that sodium sulphate, if I have taken in the solution form, we write aqueous for that, means it is in the solution form. But if I write Na2SO4 as such and do not write anything about solid or liquid or anything, that means I do not know whether I am dissolving the solid in the solution, or it is in the solution, or it is in the some other state. So, it is very important to write it, but even if we skip sometimes and we know that at normal conditions this substance remains in the solid state, then it is understood that we have taken it. If the reactions are taking place in solutions, then also it is understood that it is aqueous form. It is not necessary in that case that we should write aqueous or something in that.
Okay.
If we write AQ in the bracket, then that means it is in the solution,
Okay.
and that too in water.
Okay.
Aqueous means water.
Okay.
If there is some other solvent, in that case we write SL solvent. SL is the symbol for solvent. Otherwise, there is no need of writing.
Okay. This means if I put it this way, that in class 10th, if we are asking them to write the physical states, then our children should really focus on that, because otherwise, because whenever you write equation, it is very difficult for them to write, you know, all the time in brackets, isn't it, Professor Sindhu?
Yeah, right.
Now, there is one more thing, you know, if you go through this chapter, you see that the way you said, Professor Sindhu, that we have reactants on one side and the products on other side, and then we have an arrow. So, sometimes we write, you know, on the top of the arrow or below the arrow, like atmospheric pressure or some temperature or some catalyst. What does it signify actually?
Actually, that signifies that the conditions which are required for carrying out that reaction, maybe atmosphere, maybe catalyst, maybe some atmospheric pressure may be there, maybe temperature or pressure. So, these conditions are mentioned because there is a place for that, above the arrow or below the arrow, we write these conditions.
This means, suppose, this means basically we are trying to put things together, you know, instead of writing a big paragraph, this much temperature and this is the catalyst. So, it is better to write on an arrow and put those conditions there. Okay, and
Anjani, I would like to highlight one more thing about it. It is a shorthand notation for writing chemical formula. In fact, if we write very big paragraphs for a equation, it won't be easier for us to comprehend it. Therefore, it is a shorthand notation in chemistry, as and sometimes writing a paragraph, for writing a paragraph we write some symbols. Similarly, it is also a shorthand notation for writing chemistry.
Yeah, this means that this is basic, that is why we say chemistry has its own language, you know.
Yes.
So, that is where you are putting it. Thank you very much. Now, Professor Sindhu, since we said that we are going to talk about you know, different reactions, we are covering combination reaction and other reactions. Let me start with this, how a child should understand what exactly is a combination reaction.
In combination reaction, two reactants react together and one reactant, one product is formed. We can take example of H2 and O2, these react together and form water. H2 plus O2 will give H2O. So, that is that means these two elements are combined together to form a compound. So, that is a combination reaction.
So, you mean to say that in combination reaction we are going to get always a single product?
Yeah. I mean, since here combining of two elements is taking place to form one compound. So, that is combination.
Okay. So,
we can take another example, calcium oxide reacts with water, it gives calcium hydroxide.
Professor Sindhu, the way you said that combination reaction is like you talked about calcium oxide reacts with water to get for example, calcium hydroxide, and you know, since we have given it in a box item, that whitewashing, you know, that kind of concept we have given as in whitewashing, that usually when we put it, it's a calcium hydroxide and gradually it combines with the atmospheric carbon dioxide and we get a shine, you know, on the walls. This I would like to highlight here, that we have given so many, you know, box items in between the textbook. These are non-evaluative, and why we have given this, we want the children to really understand certain things in depth if they want. We don't want to burden them unnecessarily, because these may be beyond their, you know, cognitive level, but if they want to know, they can read further. That is what we say in National Curriculum Framework 2005, that we can go little beyond textbooks if we want to know. Well, we have tried to relate this chapter with daily life situation. Why do we focus all the time? Why do we say that we have to relate it to the daily life situation of a child? I mean, can you answer something? Why do you want exactly this?
Anjali, actually this is, chemistry is such a subject that in daily life we experience lot of experiments. Even in kitchen we find many things which are related to chemical changes, and this makes the subject very much interesting if we try to understand what is happening to the particular substance. For example, if we take lemon juice and put it in the copper vessel or in some other metallic vessel, what happens? It dissolves, acid dissolves that particular metal and substance may become harmful. For example, if I put lemon juice in copper vessel, it may become harmful for the person. So, if we understand these things, then it is very interesting for us and it helps in our life also. Therefore, we should try to understand these things.
I think that is why, you know, these kind of questions are usually asked by children, that why we should not put you know, curd in a copper vessel, or you know, things like that, or if we can put it, how long we can keep it there, you know, that is what you are trying to connect it. We have like Dr. Professor Sindhu said about combination reaction, we talk about decomposition reaction. What exactly is this, Dr. Alka?
Actually, the particular substance completely decomposes. For example, if I heat sodium bicarbonate, it decomposes into carbon dioxide and sodium carbonate, and water vapors come out. So, there is complete decomposition of the particular substance. These are specific examples, the combination reactions, and this particular reaction which I am talking about, or displacement reaction which we will talk about next. But sometimes it so happens the combination of these reactions takes place. So, in this class we have taken only those examples which are particularly related to this particular thing. For example, combination reaction which Dr. Sindhu has told is a particular example of that particular reaction in which only combination is taking place. This particular example is of decomposition only, nothing else is taking place in that. So, this way we can identify a particular type of compound in other reactions also.
Simple example, we can take ferrous sulfate. It decomposes to give Fe2O3, SO2 and SO3. So, that decomposes.
So, how a child will come to know that this gas is SO2?
Of course, there are tests for that, from the smell, of course. Here from the smell
at this
we
stage
can,
a child can smell,
stage,
you
yes,
know,
only
usually we say that you keep your test tube like this and don't bring it close to your nose, don't smell like this, you simply, you know, push the vapors towards your nose and smell it. I think that is the way one can.
In case of sulfur dioxide smelling will do.
But this is the kind of example which you give right now, I think is we talk about this is actually a thermal decomposition reaction, isn't it? Now, one of the reactions we have given where we are passing, you know, electrolysis of water we have talked about, and here we have shown that you know, we take two carbon rods and then we put you know, test tube filled with water and you invert it on that and then you get hydrogen and oxygen. And here in one of the sentences, which usually we get this question, in one of the sentences we have written that add few drops of acid. Why should we use few drops of acid, Dr. Alka?
Actually, water is a covalent compound which children will learn in the next chapter, and this covalent compound does not give so many ions that electricity is conducted into that. Therefore, we add some sulfuric acid to it, so that conductivity increases and water electrolysis takes place. Otherwise, there will not be any good conduction of electricity and decomposition will not occur. Not visible, or rather, I should say.
And one more activity we are talking about, silver chloride, where we are trying to say that keep silver chloride somewhere in sunlight and then you see what will happen to the silver chloride. That is also there where we are
decompose in the presence of sunlight, it decomposes to give, if you take example of AgCl, it decomposes to give silver and chlorine, and AgBr, that decomposes to give silver and bromine. And in fact, this phenomenon, this type of reaction is used in photography also.
I think that is also we have mentioned somewhere in our textbook that this is actually useful for photography. Well, we are talking about reactions and we are talking about like we see sometimes, you know, when we add, for example, if we put zinc in sulfuric acid and we see bubbles of hydrogen gas coming out and we can test the hydrogen gas. But sometimes when we touch the beaker or a conical flask, wherever in which container we are doing an activity, we find it a little warmth, little when you touch that you feel some heat is as if generated. What is that, Dr. Alka?
Actually, not only heat, sometimes we feel that test tube has become cold also. So, this means that some exchange of energy is taking place during the reaction, and it is either being absorbed or it is being released. And when it is released, we find heating of the substance, and when it is absorbed, we find cooling effect. So, this way we say that exothermic reaction is taking place when energy is going out, coming out, and it is a endothermic reaction when energy is absorbed and cooling effect is seen.
Professor Sindhu, I would like to ask one thing, like Dr. Alka said about exothermic and endothermic reaction. There is one reaction which I would like to specifically talk about is barium hydroxide and ammonium chloride. When we mix them together, we get a feeling of cold. When you touch the test tube or beaker, you feel a cold feeling is there, and we say that it is a endothermic reaction. Well, for this activity, we have to specifically take certain precautions for that. Can you please highlight on this issue?
Actually, this is very important thing, and especially when we were talking about that we should mention the state. In a chemical reaction, we should mention the state of the substance. And if you ask some students, okay, I am writing this equation and you now perform this reaction. So, if we have not mentioned the state in that, it is bound to happen that students would be committing mistake in that case. Here, in fact, what we think is that we say mostly in chemical reactions at lower level, we say that you prepare the solution of one substance and solution of another one and react together, other substances are formed. Here case is totally different. Here we take solid barium hydroxide, solid ammonium chloride, and then a glass rod is taken, and then it is mixed together, and then in fact immediately after some time we will see that gas is evolving out, and if you touch the test tube in which we have taken these two substances, you will see that even your palm starts cooling. So, in this case it is required that we should have both the substance in solid state.
And if we take it in a solution state?
Yes, of course, you won't see any change. In fact, what happens is that if you take barium hydroxide, when you dissolve that in water, this is a physical change, and that is an exothermic physical change. And when you add ammonium chloride in water, that is endothermic physical change. So, these two changes have already taken place, and then when you add these together, reaction won't take place, because in most of the endothermic reactions small molecules emit out. That is an indicator of an endothermic reaction. Either carbon dioxide may be there, ammonia may be there, glycine may be there. I mean, small molecules emerge out. That is the indicator of endothermic reaction. Here in this reaction, ammonia is evolved. So,
yeah, it's a very good reasoning which he has given, because we have tried this reaction couple of times, and whenever you make solution, it is not possible to get the results. And if you really take them in solid state and stir them, mix them together, stir them, and you will really feel a cold feeling, and your hand can feel that cold feeling is there. We have learnt about displacement reaction, Alkaji, maybe in class 7th. Not to that depth, we say that this is some displacement is going on. Now, in class 10th, we have introduced this displacement reaction. So, can you please highlight on this, what exactly you mean by displace? Are we displacing something from somewhere?
Yes, yes, of course, there is one experiment in this book which we have given, that zinc rod is placed in copper sulphate solution, and what happens, copper sulphate loses its color, blue color is gone, and zinc replaces copper, means zinc has displaced copper, and it has come in place in the form of zinc sulfate. Copper has come out as metal. Earlier it was zinc which was in the metallic form, and copper sulfate was in the compound form. So copper has been displaced by zinc, therefore it is a displacement reaction.
Okay, since we are running short of time, and I think we have so many things still to discuss, and children in near future, whenever we will get an opportunity, we will interact with you back and we will continue maybe this discussion.
ज्ञान भारती बालंगणित।
बस्ती से निकलते इस ज्ञान को क्या शिक्षा की परिभाषा कहा जा सकता है? शिक्षा जिसका मुख्य उद्देश्य है व्यक्ति के व्यक्तित्व का सर्वांगीण विकास। बच्चों को औपचारिक शिक्षा देने का कार्य आरंभ हो जाता है स्कूल से। स्कूल जहां शिक्षक हैं, बस्ता है, पाठ्य पुस्तकें हैं, परीक्षा है, और इन सब के केंद्र में बच्चा है। क्या बस्ते में बढ़ते इस ज्ञान को बच्चा खुशी खुशी ग्रहण कर रहा है? उसे बस्ता भारी क्यों लग रहा है? बस्ते के भारीपन का संबंध किससे है? क्या उन पाठ्य पुस्तकों से जो उसमें भरी हैं, या उस पाठ्यक्रम से जिसके हिसाब से पाठ्य पुस्तकें तैयार की जाती हैं? स्कूली पाठ्यक्रम को लेकर आज बहुत से सवाल उठ रहे हैं, और ये सवाल महत्वपूर्ण इसलिए हैं क्योंकि एक तरह से सारी स्कूली शिक्षा जुड़ जाती है जाकर बच्चे के बचपन से।
जो बचपना है वो बच्चे का बचपना चला जाता है। बस वो स्कूल आते हैं, स्कूल से घर जाते हैं, बस उनको यही लगता है होमवर्क करना है, क्लास में ये हुआ था, और फिर ना तो उनके पास खेलने का समय, ना उनके पास सोने का, कुछ भी टाइम नहीं होता उनके पास में, एक्सेप्ट दे आर वरीड फॉर देयर बुक्स कि ये काम करना है स्कूल में। घर जाते हैं, पढ़ते हैं, बैग खोलते हैं, सारा दिन उनका इन किताबों के साथ ही निकल जाता है।
कि जो इन्होंने क्या नाम शिक्षा वैज्ञानिकों ने जो ये कोर्स वगैरह बनाया है, ये तो बगैर सोचे समझे इम्प्लीमेंट कर दिया है। बजाय ये कि विद्यार्थी की योग्यता देखने के लिए उन्होंने अपनी योग्यता उसमें दिखाई है।
जैसे जैसे किताबों का बोझ बढ़ा वैसे वैसे बैग भरा, और कुछ अपने आप को भी लगा कि पढ़ाई जिस तरह स्पीड से बढ़ रही है तो प्रेशराइज फील किया काफ़ी देर।
जो सिलेबस है एक्चुअली मैंने जो देखा है सिलेबस पूरा कवर नहीं होता है। एट दी हैग एंड ऑफ मन एग्ज़ाम आ गया उस टाइम फटाफट टीचर ने करा देते हैं
कि बच्चा जो है आज के संदर्भ में, आज की शिक्षा के संदर्भ में बच्चे का बचपना तो खो गया है, किताबों से वो पूरा लद गया है। बच्चे के अंदर जो अपनी एक पर्सनैलिटी डेवलपमेंट होना चाहिए वो मेरे हिसाब से नहीं है।
I think we need a continuous review of the textbooks. There's a lot of dead wood in the textbooks which need to be removed. I mean, it is happening. I mean, there are reviews going on. But you see, knowledge is exploding at a very fast rate. And it gets outdated before even the textbook is printed.
तो राष्ट्रीय पाठ्यक्रम जो है वो मेरे हिसाब से एक फ्रेमवर्क है जिसको जो डायरेक्शंस देता है कि किसी भी लेवल पे हमें बच्चों के जो पर्यावरण के अनुकूल चीज़ें हैं उनको उसी फ्रेमवर्क के अंदर रख के हम कैसे बच्चों तक पहुंचा सकते हैं।
It's pretty mundane. You're studying in school, you're studying at home, and then becomes very what should I say, megalomaniac for like gets maddening. You're just studying all the time. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, very dull boy.
शिक्षा के प्रति यह असंतोष आखिर कहाँ है, क्यों है? क्या ये उन बच्चों में है जिनके लिए स्कूल और घर दोनों जगह बस पढ़ाई ही पढ़ाई है? यह बोझ उन्हें भी महसूस होता है जिनके बस्ते में पूरी किताबें भी नहीं हैं? किन बच्चों को ध्यान में रखकर किताबें तैयार की जाती हैं? पाठ्यक्रम का निर्माण होता है। क्या उद्देश्य होता है पाठ्यक्रम का?
पाठ्यक्रम तो एक माध्यम है जिससे हम जो बच्चों के विकास के लिए जो बातें करना चाहते हैं उसके माध्यम से की जाएं। पाठ्यक्रम में कई प्रकार के विषय आते हैं, हर एक विषय का एक अपना ही गुण होता है, उससे विशेष जो परिस्थितियां हैं वो बच्चे के सामने लाई जा सकती हैं। और जिन बातों को हम चाहते हैं कि पूर्ण रूप से बच्चे के विकसित होने के लिए आवश्यक हैं, वो पाठ्यक्रम के जो विशेष उसके कंपोनेंट्स हैं, लैंग्वेजेस हों, मैथमेटिक्स हो, विज्ञान हो, सामाजिक विज्ञान हो और हेल्थ फिज़िकल एजुकेशन हो या आर्ट एजुकेशन हो, इन सब में से कुछ ना कुछ ऐसा एस्पेक्ट होता है जो बच्चे की विकास के लिए ज़रूरी होता है। तो पाठ्यक्रम एक माध्यम बन जाता है जिसके द्वारा हम ये उनकी जो प्रतिभाएं हैं उनको विकसित कर सकते हैं, उनकी जो सृजनात्मक वृत्तियां हैं उनको उभार सकते हैं।
This period till before the 10th, it's the only period in your life where you can sit back and enjoy. I mean, if you want to do something cultural, if you want to take up music or any sport, that's the only period in your life you can do any such thing. Because 11th, 12th, you have to study. Studies are important. The rest of the year, I mean, till 8th, 9th, 10th, you can still have, I mean, you have extra time. But I think the way the courses have been increased, I don't think extra time is also, these days children don't have any extra time. You find any children, he's standing at a bus stop in front of in the morning, he's mugging up those answers for the exams. I think it's wrong, very wrong, because I think our parents who are forcing us to study today, they haven't done anything like that. Their courses were simple, and there is a sudden increase in everything. They're just putting everything on us.
ये नहीं मैं मानती कि किताबें बच्चे को नहीं देनी है। स्कूली शिक्षा का, माने स्कूली शिक्षा से मेरा मतलब है स्कूल की शिक्षा में जो एक सिलेबस है, जो प्रिस्क्राइब्ड है, उतना ज्ञान बच्चे को मिलना चाहिए उसके क्लास के हिसाब से। क्लास जो है वो उसकी आयु के हिसाब से है, पहली, दूसरी, तीसरी, ठीक उसी प्रकार से ये है। पर इतनी नहीं कि पहली के बच्चे को 4-4, 5-5, 6-6 विषय पढ़ाए जाएं, जबकि उसको 3 या 4 विषय पढ़ा देना ही काफ़ी होगा। एक बच्चे के लिए हमें क्या चाहिए? एक उसका भाषा चाहिए। जैसे आप दिल्ली जैसी जगह में रहते हैं हम लोग, तो दिल्ली के बच्चे को एक हिंदी बोली चाहिए। ये तो नहीं कि उसे बंगाली भी चाहिए, मतलब ये अंग्रेजी भी चाहिए। अब देखिए उसी बच्चे के पास आपने एक हिंदी भाषा दे दी, एक अंग्रेजी भाषा दे दी और एक हिसाब दे दिया, और ये मस्ट, माने उसके उसमें ये मस्ट हो जाता है।
Oh, I think we're being very unfair to our youngsters. I expect you see, as we all see, the children going to school with great big bags on their backs and sitting down at tables and chairs and studying the 3 R's when they're just barely 3 years of age. And I think this is really a crime against our children. Little ones must have a very creative, happy learning situation where they dance, sing, create things with clay or paint. But so many of them are being subjected to these, what I call the 3 R's.
अनफॉर्चुनेटली बहुत संशोधन की ज़रूरत है, क्योंकि जैसे मैंने कहा कि अभी तक प्री स्कूल में कोई हम निर्धारित करिकुलम नहीं देते हैं, इसलिए क्योंकि हम चाहते हैं कि जो प्रोग्राम हो बहुत चाइल्ड सेंटर्ड हो, इसलिए उसमें बहुत फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी दी जाती है। और उस फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी के कारण क्या हुआ है, जो अब परिस्थिति समय ये ऐसी है कि प्री स्कूल एजुकेशन जिस रूप में चलनी चाहिए बिल्कुल नहीं चल रही है। अधिकतर स्कूलों में, ख़ास तौर पे प्राइवेट स्कूलों में, पूर्व प्राथमिक शिक्षा है, इसने प्राथमिक शिक्षा का रूप ले लिया है। तो यानी कि छोटे बच्चों को पढ़ाया लिखाया जा रहा है, और 2-2.5 साल के बच्चे जो प्री स्कूल में आते हैं उनको लिखाया पढ़ाया जा रहा है, उनको गणित कराया जा रहा है, जो कि बिल्कुल प्री स्कूल एजुकेशन की फ़िलासफ़ी के ख़िलाफ़ है।
मुझे बड़ी आप कहना नहीं चाहिए, मेरा दुख होता है कि सब लोग सोचते हैं उठाई बुक सुबह आए, ए फॉर एप्पल, आधा बच्चा भाग गया, और मैं सोचती हूँ कि मेरी किसी क्लास में अगर बच्चा बाहर देख रहा है तो मुझे अपने आप लगने लगता है ये कोई बात ज़रूर मैं ऐसी ठीक नहीं बता रही जो उनको अच्छी नहीं लग रही, ये बाहर क्यों देख रहे हैं। और जहाँ वो खेल वाली बात हुई सारे मुझे देख रहे हैं, मेरा सेटिस्फेक्शन है, मुझे समझ रहे हैं। और जहाँ बच्चों ने खाना खोला और बस्ता खोले इसमें मेरे में कोई बात, और दिन भर टीचर्स पढ़ाती हैं, वो सुबह से आए वो भी अच्छे बच्चे के ऐसे, अच्छे बच्चे ऐसे। मैं इतनी बड़ी होकर बिना हिले नहीं रह सकती सारा दिन, तो मैं कैसे उम्मीद करती हूँ बच्चा ऐसे बैठा रहेगा।
धीरे धीरे बड़े हो, धीरे धीरे बड़े हो, धीरे धीरे पंख फैला, धीरे धीरे पंख फैला, धीरे धीरे पंख फैला।
यदि बच्चे को आरंभ से ही पंख फैलाने का अवसर दिया जाए तभी वो उड़ सकेगा, अपनी कल्पना को विस्तार दे सकेगा, अपनी प्रतिभा को विकसित कर सकेगा। केवल पाठ्य पुस्तक पढ़कर ही बच्चा सीखेगा ये जरूरी नहीं। पाठ्य पुस्तक तो एक माध्यम है। इन आनंददायी खेलों के लिए, स्वयं कुछ बनाकर संतोष पाने के लिए, अपनी आसपास की दुनिया को देखने समझने के लिए इस उम्र में किताबों की जरूरत कहाँ।
जोर से बोलिए, इस पानी में कोई चीजें डालते हैं।
मिलजुल कर खेल खेल में वो बहुत कुछ सीख सकता है। ये समय पढ़ना लिखना सीखने की तैयारी का समय है। प्राथमिक स्तर पर भाषा, गणित, सामाजिक ज्ञान, विज्ञान आदि विषयों की औपचारिक शिक्षा शुरू हो जाती है। प्राथमिक स्तर पर पाठ्यक्रम की रूपरेखा तैयार करते समय क्या बच्चे की क्षमताओं, उसकी जिज्ञासाओं को ध्यान में रखा गया?
Each stage of curriculum is drawn keeping in view the national curriculum framework and of course the national goals. But for the primary stage specifically, we keep the age and the developmental characteristics of children.
नली और इसमें बंधे गुब्बारे से पानी निकाल दे, नली को पानी से भरी बाल्टी।
विज्ञान विषय को समझने समझाने के लिए पुस्तक से पढ़ने की नहीं, प्रयोग करके देखने की जरूरत है, जिसके बिना ये विषय बच्चों को बोझिल लगने लगता है। हमारे देश में बहुत से स्कूल ऐसे भी हैं जहां पाठ्यक्रम का बोझ इसलिए भी महसूस किया जाता है क्योंकि वहां शिक्षण सुविधाओं का अभाव है।
Yes, to some extent. I mean, the curriculum is not really designed for schools which have all the facilities, because particularly in our country, there are very large number of schools which have very minimum facilities. So it is kept, they are kept in view, the teachers in those schools are kept in view while designing the curriculum. So no ambitious claims are made. I mean, we don't expect that all our schools will have the best of facilities and the best of teachers. That is not there.
कोर्स आराम में बहन जी आराम से तो पूरा नहीं होता, दिक्कत पड़ती है उसमें, क्योंकि हेड मास्टर की तो महीना में 2 तो मीटिंग होती हैं जी, और भी जैसे किसी दिन धन जमा करना होता है या और भी काम निकल जाते हैं जी, ऐसे भी जाना पड़ता है उसे। तो कोर्स तो पूरी साल में करना तो पड़ा है जी, लेकिन उसमें बहुत दिक्कत पड़ जाती हैं। एक स्टाफ की कमी हर जगह रहती है जी। अब मेरे यहाँ 145-150 बच्चे हैं जी, लेकिन हम 3 अध्यापक हैं।
हाँ, कोर्स तो जितना है जी वो पूरा हो ही जाता है साल भर में लगभग, मैं समझता हूँ।
ऑलमोस्ट सारा पाठ्यक्रम हम जनवरी तक ख़त्म कर देते हैं और फरवरी मार्च के अंदर हम रिवीजन चलाते हैं उसका। तो पाठ्यक्रम तो ठीक है स्कूल का, इसमें कोई ज़्यादती नहीं है।
जो हमारे पास सिलेबस आया हुआ है वो हमारे हिसाब से ठीक है, क्योंकि बच्चों को जो करवाया जाता है, कुछ बच्चे ऐसे हैं जो जिनके पेरेंट्स ज़्यादा पढ़े लिखे नहीं हैं, उनके लिए थोड़ी मुश्किल पड़ती है। बाकी तो पेरेंट्स काफ़ी हेल्प करते हैं, बहुत कोऑपरेट करते हैं, जो होमवर्क वगैरह दिया जाता है करवा देते हैं, जिस वजह से हमारा सिलेबस कवर हो जाता है।
होमवर्क वैसे ज़रूरी इसलिए है कि सिलेबस थोड़ा सा कवर उसमें भी हो जाता है,
थोड़ा हम इजी काम घर में दे जाते हैं, सारा काम स्कूल में नहीं हो सकता, इतना टाइम नहीं होता कि पूरा कुछ स्कूल में ही हो जाए, इसलिए होमवर्क देना भी ज़रूरी हो जाता है। पर यह है कि बड़ी क्लासेस में सब अलग अलग सब्जेक्ट के अलग अलग टीचर्स हैं, तो सब अपना अपना देना चाहते हैं, सब चाहते हैं कि ख़त्म हो सिलेबस।
देखा जाए कि बोर्ड एग्ज़ाम्स के लिए बच्चा कितना डरता है, क्यों ये डर इसलिए है क्योंकि कोर्सेज इतने ज़्यादा बढ़ चुके हैं, करिकुलम का जिस हिसाब से बढ़ रहा है करिकुलम, उस हिसाब से बच्चा डरता है एग्ज़ाम देने से, स्पेशली जब बोर्ड एग्ज़ाम्स की बात आती है।
ये ठीक है कि सभी कही गई बातें पाठ्यक्रम से जुड़ी हैं, पर साथ ही जुड़ी हैं कई और चीजों से भी, स्कूली व्यवस्था से, होमवर्क से, अभिभावकों की आकांक्षाओं से और वर्तमान परीक्षा प्रणाली से। यदि प्राइमरी स्तर पर सीखने सिखाने की प्रक्रिया सही रूप में नहीं होती तो आगे चलकर माध्यमिक और फिर उच्चतर माध्यमिक स्तर पर भी पढ़ाई मुश्किल ही लगती है। शायद पाठ्यक्रम के भारीपन और परीक्षा का भय दोनों का आपसी संबंध है। पूरे देश में शिक्षा सुविधाओं और साधनों में चाहे कितनी भी विविधता हो, बच्चे को परीक्षा तो देनी ही है। ये परीक्षा बच्चे की योग्यता की है या पाठ्यक्रम की, ये निर्णय करना बहुत मुश्किल है। सच तो ये है, मूल्यांकन बच्चे की योग्यता का हो तो वो परीक्षा के भय से मुक्त हो सकेगा।
इम्तिहान का टाइम में बच्चों के साथ मेरा भी थोड़ा टेंशन हो जाता है, ये ठीक से कर पाएगा कि नहीं, पर क्या पूरा कवर होगा कि नहीं होगा, टेंशन तो हो जाता है बच्चों के साथ।
कि हमारा जो पाठ्यक्रम है उसी प्रकार से बनाया गया है कि हमें बच्चों को प्रिपेयर करना पड़ता है कि उनके 3 महीने के बाद में उनके एग्ज़ाम होते हैं, या हमारे स्कूल में जैसे साइकिल टेस्ट हम लेते हैं, तो एक बच्चों के मन में एक डर सा रहता है हर समय कि हमें पढ़ना है, हमारे एग्ज़ाम होंगे, और टीचर्स को भी ये होता है कि हमारे अब एग्ज़ाम्स होने वाले हैं और इस समय के अंदर हमें सारा ही कोर्स ख़त्म करना है। तो वो आई थिंक डायरेक्टली रिलेटेड है हमारे करिकुलम और एग्जामिनेशन सिस्टम से।
मैं ये सजेस्ट करती हूँ कि टिल क्लास 5 एग्जामिनेशंस तो होने नहीं चाहिए। हमारे कोई स्कूल्स में हर क्लास के बाद एग्जामिनेशंस होते हैं, लेकिन इट शुड नॉट बी एन एग्जाम ओरिएंटेड क्लासेस अप टिल प्राइमरी लेवल। जो बच्चे ने रोज़ का पढ़ा उसी पे रेगुलरली उसको टेस्ट कर लिया, ना कि उसको कोई प्रॉपर एग्जामिनेशन फेयर के नीचे कि अब आपका ये एग्ज़ाम है और साल भर के एंड में प्रमोशन शुड नॉट बी अकॉर्डिंग टू एग्जामिनेशन बेसिस, इट शुड बी अकॉर्डिंग टू द डे टू डे परफॉर्मेंस ऑफ अ चाइल्ड।
Well, I personally am very much against external examinations. I think we must go forward to continuous evaluation from day-to-day work for the children. And I think the teacher who teaches the child knows the child best. And therefore, that is the teacher who should evaluate the child's work. I think when we go for these external examinations, it's all so impersonal and too large. We're getting swamped by numbers, and I think many children suffer in the process of this external examination.
हाँ, परीक्षा व्यवस्था से तो है, क्योंकि इस समय क्या होते हैं, टीचर भी बड़ी टेंस रहती है, पेरेंट्स भी बहुत टेंस रहते हैं। टीचर का यदि कोर्स पूरा ना हुआ हो तो वो सोचती है कि इम्तहान की जो डेट दी गई है उससे पहले इस कोर्स को पूरा करवा लूँ।
देखिए, मैं व्यक्तिगत रूप से ये सहमत नहीं हूँ कि परीक्षा प्रणाली को सामने रख के हम करिकुलम बनाएं। होना तो ये चाहिए और ठीक भी यही है कि करिकुलम जो चाहिए वो बनाया जाए, और उसको ट्रांजैक्ट करने के लिए, उसको बच्चों तक पहुंचाने के लिए जो हमने ध्येय करिकुलम के सामने रखे थे, पाठ्यक्रम के लिए रखे थे, उन ध्येयों को सामने रख के हम एग्ज़ामिनेशन का, परीक्षा का जो डिज़ाइन है उससे मेल खाएं। अगर हमने वहाँ वहाँ कुछ ऐसे ध्येय रखे हैं कि बच्चों को हमें ये चीज़ें बतानी हैं, तो पाठ्यक्रम जो शिक्षा है, जो एग्ज़ामिनेशन है, उसमें हमें इस तरह का ही वो होना चाहिए परीक्षा में कि वो ध्येयों की टेस्टिंग हो। पर हो ये रहा है कि जो एग्जिस्टिंग सिस्टम है एग्ज़ामिनेशन का, वो सारी वो चीज़ें टेस्ट नहीं कर पाता है।
एक ओर पाठ्यक्रम है, दूसरी ओर परीक्षा। पाठ्यक्रम के बोझ की बात करते समय परीक्षा प्रणाली को अलग नहीं किया जा सकता। पाठ्यक्रम में संशोधन की संभावनाएं हैं और उसके साथ ही कक्षा शिक्षण, परीक्षा प्रणाली और शिक्षा सुविधाओं में भी निश्चय ही संशोधन के समय बच्चों को भी ध्यान में रखना चाहिए। आज जिन्हें किताबों का बोझ महसूस होने लगा है, उन शिक्षकों का भी जिनके स्कूल के बच्चों के बस्तों में पूरी किताबें भी नहीं है। ऐसी स्थिति में राष्ट्रीय पाठ्यक्रम का स्वरूप क्या हो, बदलाव कहां हो?
तो आवश्यकता इस बात की है कि हमें ये स्पष्ट हो कि पाठ्यक्रम में हमें ये चीज़ें ज़रूर डालनी हैं, और जब वो पाठ्यक्रम एक राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर उसकी मान्यता हो जाए तो उसकी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के लिए अगर अध्यापक वर्ग को उसकी ओरिएंटेशन चाहिए, टीचर ट्रेनिंग चाहिए, वो ज़रूरी हो जाती है करनी। उससे पाठ्यक्रम की इम्प्लीमेंटेशन ज़रा फैसिलिटेट हो जाती है। पर ये कहना कि क्योंकि टीचर तैयार नहीं है तो इसलिए पाठ्यक्रम को ऐसे ढंग से बनाया जाए कि वो टीचर की जो क्षमता अभी उस वक्त तक, उस समय तक नहीं पहुंची है, उससे कम हो, वो पाठ्यक्रम में एक डिस्टॉर्शन पैदा करता है।
They do plan the curriculum what they teach, but the higher authorities, they have a say in the matter, so they do the curriculum and they will set the pattern and give it. So if a teacher is given a hold to do that, yes, it may be more useful for the child.
Well, I'd certainly cut down the amount of books that these small children have to cope up with, and I'd put in more of sports and play and a practical approach to things. If you're learning about the Carnot set, whatever in physics, you should be shown the mechanism. You should know how it's done. It's very imaginative, our study right now. We have to imagine how this mechanism works, how this machine works. Once you don't see it, you don't grasp it so much. So I'd encourage audio visuals and these, of course, a very practical approach, and cut down the pressure that studies is right now. I mean, reduce it and try and make the courses more career oriented. I mean, you spend 12 years in school, then you spend 3 years graduating, then 2 years professionalizing, and still, are you fit enough? Can you call yourself a well-educated person who is ready to face the world at that stage? You should cut down on books and give it a more practical approach, and give this child to think on their own for a change.
And I think it's up to us in the schools actually to plan our curriculum in such a way that even within the restraints of the existing system, to work out a program where we give equal emphasis to academics, to acquisition of skills, the technical side, and also what I call social awareness, community service. I think school must interact with the community. It is absolutely essential. And our children should go out into the slums, into the hospitals, into the blind institutes, and work with the people. And in this way, I think they will develop new dimensions to their personalities. They will be much more responsible citizens of our country. They will be doing something of national service, literacy. And I think that in itself takes off a lot of the pressure of the academic load.
तो हम कोई भी कार्यक्रम जो बच्चों का बनाते हैं या प्लान करते हैं, उसमें ऐसा है कि एक संतुलित कार्यक्रम होना चाहिए, जिसमें कि भाषा के लिए विकास के लिए कुछ एक्टिविटीज़ होनी ज़रूरी हैं, मानसिक विकास के लिए कुछ एक्टिविटीज़ होनी ज़रूरी हैं, शारीरिक विकास के लिए कुछ एक्टिविटीज़ होनी ज़रूरी हैं, बच्चों की क्रिएटिविटी को उभारने के लिए कुछ एक्टिविटीज़ होनी ज़रूरी हैं। तो इस तरह का एक बैलेंस्ड प्रोग्राम होना ज़रूरी है। और सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी चीज़ जो ध्यान में रखी जाती है वो ये है कि जो कुछ भी एक्टिविटीज़ दी जाए या जो भी कार्यक्रम किया जाए वो खेल द्वारा हो।
हमने जब अब मिनिमम लेवल्स ऑफ लर्निंग की बात की है बच्चों तक पहुँचाने की, तो क्या जो पाठ्यक्रम है वो सारी कॉम्पिटेंसीज़ को दर्शाता है? उसमें अपने लैंग्वेज के करिकुलम में, मैथमेटिक्स के करिकुलम में वो सारी कॉम्पिटेंसीज़ हैं अगर बताता है, उसकी जो उपयुक्त एक्टिविटीज़ हैं करने के लिए वो क्या उसमें हैं? अगर नहीं हैं तो ये ज़रूरी हो जाएगा कि नया पाठ्यक्रम बनाया जाए जो कि इन मिनिमम लेवल्स ऑफ लर्निंग से अनुकूल हो।
कहीं पाठ्यक्रम बोझिल है, कहीं शिक्षकों के प्रशिक्षण की आवश्यकता, अभिभावकों की अपेक्षाएं भी कहीं बहुत ज्यादा हैं, कहीं शिक्षा सुविधाओं साधनों का अभाव है, और जैसा कि पहले भी कहा गया, इन सब के केंद्र में है बच्चा, जिसके बारे में हम आज सोच रहे हैं। हम उसे ऐसी शिक्षा देना चाहते हैं जिससे वो देश का अच्छा नागरिक बन सके, और उसे शिक्षा इस तरह से देना चाहते हैं कि किताबें उसे अपनी दोस्त लगें, पढ़ने, लिखने, सीखने, समझने में उसे आनंद आए, उसे आकाश मिले उड़ने के लिए, धीरे धीरे बड़े होने के लिए, और धीरे धीरे पंख फैलाने के लिए।
पंख फैला, धीरे धीरे पंख फैला, धीरे धीरे बड़े हो, धीरे धीरे बड़े हो, धीरे धीरे पंख फैला, धीरे धीरे पंख फैला, धीरे धीरे पंख फैला, फुर्र से उड़ जा, फुर्र से उड़ जा, फुर्र से उड़ जा।
Hello student, today we are going to perform an activity in mathematics regarding volume of a cone, hemisphere, cylinder. They have equal height and equal radius, and we believe that by doing activity our learning become better and we understand the things lot, and we can utilize this knowledge further. To do this activity, the material requires are cone, right circular cone, hemisphere and right circular cylinder, and to measure the volume we have taken the sand. Now, we will perform the activity. First, we will fill up the cone by sand and make it full, and pour this into the hemisphere. Second time we will fill up the cone by sand and it should be filled fully, and now we will pour into the hemisphere. We have seen that the 2 times sand containing in the cone fills the hemisphere. Now, we will see this in case of cylinder. We will fill up the cone and pour into the cylinder. Second time we again fill up the cone and pour into the cylinder. Now, the third time we fill up the cone by sand. And we pour into the cylinder. And we have seen that the 3 times of the cone fills the cylinder. So, here we observe that the volume, the relations of volume between cone and hemisphere is 1:2 and cone and cylinder is 1:3. If we combine and say together, then we will find that the relation of volume among cone, hemisphere and cylinder is 1:2:3. Now, we will see the result mathematically. We know that volume of cone is 1/3 of pi r square h and volume of hemisphere is 2/3 of pi r cube and volume of cylinder is pi r square h. Here since h is equal to r, so volume of cone will become 1/3 of pi r cube and volume of hemisphere is 2/3 of pi r cube and volume of cylinder is pi r cube. Now, if we take ratio among these three, we will get 1/3 of pi r cube is to 2/3 of pi r cube is to pi r cube, and we will get ultimately 1:2:3. We have verified this result mathematically and by activity also. The same thing we can do by others material like liquids, etc. Thank you.
All of us are learners. We all learn about life. We also learn about the workplace, people around, and the work-related competencies. Teachers are no exception to lifelong learning.
One stroll down we have a one so early in the morning, so early in the morning.
What we were doing was giving the child a feeling of how the one looked like and how the hand.
Effective teachers continue to learn about new ways of learning and teaching. Education and training institutions provide opportunities for organized learning to pre-service and in-service teachers.
You have noted down the points?
Research suggests better learning when learners are clear about what is to be learnt. They themselves take responsibility for learning, and they are actively involved in the learning. Cooperative learning methods
which have been found to be effective in schools, can also be used for effective teacher training. We will call it the cooperative learning-based approach to the training of teachers. The course leaders responsible for transacting the training course introduce the learning task outlined on the study guide sheet.
And what are the things in which you need some improvement, some strengthening on? So that is what is to be written. So that the areas in which you feel that you require a little more strengthening and improvement, you can plan out the program and negotiate an objective in this part. Only this is to be done.
The study guide sheet specifies learning objectives, highlights issues, raises questions to reflect and evaluate, suggests learning activities, and lists reading material. The first learning activity involves individual reading and reflection. The learner highlights and jots down thoughts.
That in these 5 minutes each you can discuss your reactions to this story. We will give you more time for interacting on these questions.
Your general reactions, that's all.
How do you feel about it?
Individual reading and reflection are followed by sharing in pairs. Trainees in adjacent seats form pairs. Each explains to the other in about 20 minutes what each thinks on various aspects of the task. It helps in enriching others on the issues involved. New points are added to their individual lists. Sometimes they also work together to solve problems.
What is the nature of his child's needs? Like, what is the problem?
I mean, they're not really excited about my, I mean, again, the behavior problem to it. And
When he goes into the next class, that is when he is. And the second row, which is
Small groups of 4 to 5 trainees are then formed in such a way that participants are mixed. The group membership is changed. For example, groups can be formed by count. 1s in the first group, 2s in the second, and so on. The participants can stand according to height and then form groups by count. In group work, the furniture should be light and functional so that it can be moved easily.
Then let us now get one each from each row. 4. 1.
In these groups, the trainees present their thinking, argue and weigh, take decisions, and bring out the group point of view. The reports can be displayed on bulletin boards or walls. The course leader gives instruction and help to groups.
Factors to take. That is what you have to consider as a whole group. And put down your points and share with the group what your group feels. Okay? So how you will do it is how that strategy, if they can, is used.
The outcome can be summarized on fillet charts with bold sketch pens in different colors if needed. 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the nature of the task, can be provided for this activity.
When children at work, and according to teacher will record the mistakes, and then in class stage she will grading and encouraging the children.
Role play is also sometimes organized.
किसका है? कौन लेके दिया? हस्बैंड? नो, नॉट मैरिड. शादी नहीं हुआ. कब करेगा शादी? पेंसिल? नो पेंसिल? लिखना है कुछ? नहीं. साथ में लेफ्ट हैंड में लो. लेफ्ट हैंड. आपका एड्रेस मालूम है? घर का एड्रेस मालूम है? घर का एड्रेस. लिख लो. इसमें लिखो. कम ले लो. ट्राई करो. रहते हो ना, वो लिखो. लिख के बताओ. नॉट वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग. वंदना, कैच बॉल. लेफ्ट हैंड, राइट हैंड. उल्टा हाथ, सीधा हाथ. राइट. ये सीधा हाथ. खाना किस में खाते हो? खाना कौन से हाथ से खाते हो? सीधा हाथ. ये सीधा हाथ है. ये सीधा. सीधा. कैसे पढ़ाते हैं? कपड़े डालना, उतारना, शूज पहनना. अच्छा, बच्चों का काम करते हैं. आपके घर में भी बच्चे हैं? एक भाई. और कौन कौन है? पापा, मम्मी. अब कहाँ रहते हैं? आरकेपुर. आपका स्कूल कहाँ है? स्कूल आपका कहाँ है? वसंत विहार. वसंत विहार.
आप क्या पढ़ाती हैं?
छोटे बच्चे. कपड़े उतारना, डालना, सब. असिस्टेंट टीचर होंगे.
आपका भाई कितना बड़ा है? आपसे बड़ा है कि छोटा है?
पढ़ते स्कूल. आपने कहाँ तक पढ़ा है?
आप स्कूल में पढ़े हैं ना? जाते थे आप स्कूल पढ़ने?
स्कूल जाती थी।
कितनी क्लास तक आपने पढ़ा है? आपको याद है ना? बताओ कितनी क्लास तक आपने पढ़ा है? आप काउंट कर लीजिए।
आपका भाई कौन सी क्लास में पढ़ता है?
The stage is now set for sharing in the large group comprising all trainees.
So common parts of breaking the task into smaller steps only, then freedom of choice. That is, it increases
Each group presents a report in 2 to 5 minutes. These are discussed and synthesized, and a cooperative outcome is pulled out and recorded on Philip charts. The experiences of the participants are further enriched.
Then increases motivation level, satisfaction. Child really feels satisfied if he or she himself will. Then achievement level also goes high. Gets encouraged, increases involvement, and moreover, child gains more and more confidence.
Finally, the total learning process is evaluated, individually as well as cooperatively. The feedback is used to improve the cooperative learning process for oncoming encounters.
And then, most probably in your next practice classes, when you get into your activity situations, then you can just work them out and see how they work during the week. That is going to be an experience. You bring your experiences here after.
There could be some strategies which work much better than others, you know, depending upon what you are teaching and the group you are teaching. Because when I was discussing, I was seeing the groups discussing amongst themselves, it was coming through that some special educators were thinking in slightly different lines than as compared to the general educators. Now, when you go and practice this in the classroom, you will again see that this difference may stand out. So, we would like you to bring all these issues that you experience regarding, as Professor Digna said, regarding the various strategies, and let us know next week.
Come out of this experience.
Yeah. No, but if what is slightly different and what the methods that we use to...
The course leader acts as a moderator and facilitator of activities. His interventions are minimum and free from value judgments. He ensures the participation of all in different activities. The emphasis is on doing, reflecting, and learning. The cooperative learning-based training approach has several advantages.
Initially, I was very hesitant, and because I was hesitant to speak because I didn't know how the course would be conducted. And later on, I got used to the discussions in groups and pairs, and I enjoyed doing what you enjoy. Yes.
What do you have to say about it?
Actually, frankly speaking, we have been really enjoying, though it had been quite tiring. But still, what we were expecting was we are going to work on learning disabilities and the remedies of learning disabilities. How can we overcome those learning disabilities and how can we implement in the class, which is missing. And otherwise, it's nice, we are interacting with each other. We never got the time to interact between the senior teacher and the other special group teachers. So it's nice to interact with each other.
Now, as regards the content of the training covered till now, what do you have to say? Content.
Contents are very good. I like the reading material that's been given to us, and the activities are very interesting. But there's a lot of reading to be done. That's all.
The materials were quite good, very informative in fact, but only thing is because of our tight schedule, we were not just not able to cope up with what you've given.
You didn't get sufficient time to read because this has been a free year academic. It's not a usual academic year, so you didn't get enough time to read. Okay. Otherwise, you said you liked it.
Yeah, it was very informative.
What about the language of the material?
Language also is good, and I mean quite up to our standard, but it there were just a few words which we were not able to understand. But then we got over it.
You just mentioned about liking the groups.
The trainees feel interested and motivated because of active involvement. Motivation is sustained throughout. They have the opportunity to examine all dimensions of the learning task, issues involved, and problems encountered.
After this, I made up my mind that I can cope up with a disabled child.
What problem did you select? Firstly, let me know.
It was a very common problem. In my class, I'm teaching classes 9th and 10th. Right. So the problem which I had taken was the weak student who was not paying attention in the class. Even he was not doing his homework regularly. That was my problem. So first I tried to find out the reasons why he is doing so. So it was only his less attention. Mind was getting distracted very easily, and he was afraid of writing down the chemical equations.
I'd like to know, what did you learn from the general educators? You are a special educator yourself.
Yes.
This was an opportunity to interact as a group. What did you learn?
Initially, they were not aware of the special children.
So you got a chance.
Now they got a chance of learning, getting to know what is special handicap, what is handicap. And now I feel that they're more aware and they're ready to, sort of share and cooperate.
I see.
Cooperation I found was there.
And that's
especially
a healthy sign, isn't it?
Yes, especially
it makes you feel good.
Yes. That's why we are doing so much together.
Today I would like to form groups.
Finally, it paves the way for the transfer of training effects to actual practice in schools, not only in teaching, but also in dealing with other educational needs, including the special needs of the children.
You call out numbers 1 to 8. After 8, again the next child will say 1. Say 1, 2. Remember what number you're calling out, okay? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Take a bath every day. Cleanliness is next to godliness.
Learning together is a joy, isn't it?
मित्रों, आपको हमारे कार्यक्रम कैसे लगे? आप अपनी प्रतिक्रियाएं और सुझाव हमें भेज सकते हैं। हमारा पता है किशोर मंच, CIET NCERT, श्री अरविंदो मार्ग, नई दिल्ली 110016। आप अपने सुझाव हमें ईमेल द्वारा भी भेज सकते हैं। हमारा ईमेल पता है ciet.kishormanch@gmail.com।